Okay, so it looks like we're streaming right now.
Which he thought were related to his COVID Pfizer vaccine. On Friday morning,
okay, so looks like I have the stream up and running. I'm syncing volume. I'm just going to quickly check to see if everything's working on my end. And once again, enough people, I'll start.
That test result came back this morning.
I'll start.
To be positive. Case 1001 lives at her home in Nollamara. During this period, 7 other people were living in this house, including 2 guests from Canberra. Late this morning, those 7 people were tested, and their results returned just after 1:30 p.m. today. Out of these 7,
looks like I am hearing myself. Okay, yep, everything seems to be working. Cool, and I guess we just wait for people to join in and then we can start.
Case 1001 are being moved into hotel quarantine. One of the additional positive cases shared a room with case 1001.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to announce this because YouTube disabled my ability to post discussion threads, or if they have, they've moved to someplace else. I kind of like being able to make posts, otherwise I have to put them in videos, and I don't like, just making videos just to make quick announcements. I do it a few times, but I try to avoid it. Okay, we got 1 concurrent viewer, so obviously someone's found me. Hope you weren't looking for the regular coverage and accidentally found me, but if you have come to see me, well, thank you. I welcome you, and I believe the election should be starting in about 8 minutes, and I think I got the time right this time. Last time I made the mistake of unfortunately forgetting daylight savings and actually starting to stream an hour early, so we had to waste an hour waiting for everyone to come on, but this time I think I've got it right. So currently we're just watching the ABC Live broadcast off YouTube. They'll then switch over to the Tasmanian election when the time rolls around. So in the meantime, we can just watch Mark McGowan as he talks about COVID. I'm not sure. By the way, they did. For any of you guys watching from the last election video, they did. The WA had their first parliamentary sitting after that ridiculous election, and it is quite crazy to see Labor members sitting where a Liberal front bench should normally sit. That was definitely quite a wow experience.
Our restrictions in place, our use of masks, and the ability of our contact tracers and testing gives us the ability to hold a decision on a lockdown decision. Sorry. Our restrictions in place.
Okay. We've already got our first like, which is nice. Feel free to leave stuff in the chat. By the way, like at this point, at the moment, it's best just for me to just answer questions. Helps me do something while we're waiting for the election to happen.
Local security guard working at hotel quarantine, and 2 of his housemates have tested positive for COVID-19 in Perth. The security guard worked at the Pan Pacific Hotel in the city centre on the 24th, 25th and 26th of April and spent time in the community since then. He and 7 housemates, including 2 visitors from Canberra, have been moved into hotel quarantine. There is no plan at this stage for a lockdown. The federal government has rejected suggestions it's abandoning its own citizens by threatening them with jail time if they return from India. In the latest escalation of travel restrictions, the government says anyone who arrives in Australia having been in India in the previous 14 days could face up to 5 years in jail and a $66,000 fine. The move is designed to stop Australians travelling home from India via a third country.
When National Cabinet met, they received the most up-to-date briefing from our chief medical.
Anyone got opinions on this at the moment? I know you're here for the election, but anyone interested in talking about the news?
Secure measures with respect to people coming from India to Australia. So they're temporary, they'll be reviewed on the 15th of May, but they're designed based on the medical advice to keep Australians safe.
Oh.
Federal opposition the government's move to threaten Australian citizens with jail time if they return from
If people were curious,
Labor's
I'll
Mark Butler says the
quickly.
government is
Here's the current layout for the election. So, I'm sorry. Sorry, just had a mint in my mouth. So here's the current layout for the election at the moment. If you guys are curious, there are 13 seats. The Liberals hold 13 seats. Actually, they lost one, I believe. So they're actually a minority government at the moment. That's why they called this election. So Tasmania is one of only two governments, it has been the federal government, that doesn't have fixed parliamentary terms. The elections have to be called as opposed to occurring on a set date. Basically, Peter Gutwin had a majority, but has since lost it due to one member defecting. Oh, good. We've got one chat right now. I'll get back to you in a second, Rob. So we've got obviously 13 seats. Labor has 9 and the Greens have 2. Now, Tasmania is a bit of a funky state because I think I'll go back to the last election. They have 5 seats of 5 members, so it's a total of 25 seats up for grabs. However, it's never happened in recent memory that a party has won all 5 of one electorate's seats. So normally they'll either win 3, which the Liberals did in 3 cases, or 2, which the Liberals did in 2 cases. So basically, Liberals. I guess you guys probably want election predictions, don't you? So, basically, it's looking very much likely that the Liberals will retain it. There are probably one of 3 possibilities. The likeliest possibility I see is Liberals retaining their 3 seats in. I forgot what the name of these seats are. I think that's. I've seen it before. Actually, here it is. I see Liberals retaining their 3 seats in Braddon, Bass, and Lyons, and then possibly picking up one in Franklin or one in Clark. That's what I suspect is possibly likely. What is also quite likely is basically a null, so Liberals don't gain any seats or perhaps lose a seat. Very unlikely. I do not think Labor's going to win a majority government, so sorry, Labor supporters like myself, I don't think Labor's going to win a majority government. But what could happen is we could see Greens make a rise in several of these seats, forcing either party into a minority government.
Units, we understood that wasn't the case, and there'd been a stampede, and people who were stressed tried exiting out of the way where there was no exit, and that's what caused the major incident which we saw last night.
Most of the people that were there were just crushed and under all the people, and what we had to do is perform CPR, and at some stage I had to go as chief paramedic and the paramedic on the scene.
In Western Sydney offers safety and comfort to women escaping domestic violence.
We can't actually assist all the women that already need help.
Okay,
Funding
it says my microphone's working, and it says the stream's back. I think we had a bit of an issue. Cheeseburger, what's a booger? Can you confirm if you can hear me again?
but we also turned away over 1,200 women and children. So losing one staff member will make that figure high.
The organisation is one of many homelessness and crisis accommodation services
Okay, good. I don't know what happened. So by the way, where did I cut out? Like had I made my election prediction before my sound died?
Between the federal government and states and territories to share the cost of increased wages is in doubt. The sectors will
Okay.
$56 million a year.
I'll just repeat what I basically said. Polling currently has the Liberals at 41, Labor at 32, and Greens at 12. So obviously it's not a WA election. It's not going to be a WA election wipeout. I'm suspecting my current prediction. I suspect the Liberals to win possibly 12 to 14 seats, Labor to win 10, and Greens to win somewhere between 4 to maybe 2 to 4 seats. It's very likely that there might be a minority government in this election. It really depends on how well the Greens do, and the Greens have been polling reasonably well. If you're curious, guys, I'll just yet again show you the results. Those are the last election. And, oh, by the way, are any of you guys actually Tasmanian? I am curious to know if any of you guys actually voted in this election. Okay, so it says here that we could go about 3 minutes before they switch. Oh, wait a minute. I do apologise, we were falling behind on the stream. I do apologise for that, guys. We are actually... the video is a bit delayed. Let's watch the introduction, and I'll come back in a bit.
Election night in Tasmania.
Peter Gutwein has taken a political gamble, going to the polls early, trying to cash in on his government's successful handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Premier called the election during a brief window of minority government, effectively kicking the Speaker, Sue Hickey, out of the Liberal Party.
Over the next few hours, we'll see if going to the polls early pays off, and Gutwein becomes the first Tasmanian Liberal Premier to lead his government into a third term.
Live around the country from beautiful Hobart, this is Tasmania Votes. Hello and welcome to the ABC Election Centre, live from the last tally room in Australia. I'm Sabra Lane.
And I'm Guy Stainer. The polls have just closed across the state, and over the next few hours we'll bring you the results as soon as they arrive here in the tally room.
We've got reporters and camera crews around the state who'll be bringing you instant reaction and analysis of the results. And of course, it wouldn't be an ABC election without our chief election analyst, Anthony Green. Anthony, good evening. Take us through the current 25-seat chamber.
Well, this is the chamber that was elected at the last election. I'll get onto the slight changes since. At the last election, the Liberals got back with a bare majority, 13, which is a one-seat majority. Labor won 10 seats and the Greens 2. Since then, Sue Hickey has moved to the crossbench and is running again in Clark. And Madeleine Ogilvie was elected at a countback, left the Labor Party and is running as a Liberal at this election. So those numbers have altered slightly, but that's the better way to think of it in terms of the numbers from the last election. And we've got 5 electorates in Tasmania to explain the Hare-Clark electoral system, because people will be talking about it a lot tonight, and on the mainland it's just all gobbledygook. But the Tasmania uses the same 5 electorates for its state elections as it does at its federal. So we have Bass, Braddon, which are the 2 key seats at federal elections, then Lyons, Franklin and Clark. Clark used to be known as Denison, and the drinking game tonight is anyone says Denison, you can have the, but Clark will try and say Clark all night because that's what it's known as now. But those 5 electorates elect 5 members. At the moment, the Liberal Party have 3 in 3 electorates and 2 in the others. It's a quota-based system. You get 16%, you get 1 seat. 33%, you get 2. If a party gets to 50% in a seat, they win 3 seats. Now, it's slightly more complex than that because it's a preferential system. But essentially, what we're watching for tonight is, can the Liberal Party hold those 3 2 in the north, 3 in the 2 seats in the north, 3 in Central Lyons, and then we've got 2 seats in Franklin they're expected to hold, and Clark, where they hold 2 seats. Can they get a second seat with all the other contests going on there? For the Labor Party, can they get beyond 2 in any of the seats they've got now? It's a harder task for Labor to get to majority. And for the Greens, they hold a seat in Clark and Franklin. Can they push back into Bass and do well in other seats?
We know you're pretty excited by this, but there's also another election happening, the Legislative Council alongside this Assembly election.
Well, I never thought I'd do the Tasmanian Legislative Council election on live national television, but it's a beautiful little chamber with lovely, red velvet lounges. It's got tables these days, unfortunately, all looked over by this magnificent, gigantic portrait of Queen Victoria. It's got 15 members. They're elected 2 or 3 every year over a 6-year cycle. They've never held the election on the same day as the state election. It's normally full of independents, but at the moment there are more party members in the upper house at the moment than there've ever been in Tasmanian history. And with the conjoint elections, there is the chance there could be 2 more party members going into the upper house at this election. Now, we'll get some of those figures a little earlier, but we will cover them, but our main focus, of course, will be on the House of Government, the House of Assembly.
All right, thanks, Anthony. And we'll check back in as soon as we have the first results trickling in.
We're joined tonight.
All right, guys. So that's basically the background of the election. I might try and quickly jump ahead to. I might quickly just jump ahead. Okay. Have we? There we go. Okay, we're now up to date. I do apologise for being a bit behind, everybody, but we are now following live with the election results. Obviously, you guys will have a little bit of delay because of my live stream. But by the way, feel free to just ask away with questions and stuff if you have anything you want to know about my opinions on this election and stuff, and I'll feel free to tell you what I think and stuff.
Senator, Barbara, there's issues and there's issues, but we've got a woman who's alleging with documentary evidence and a statutory declaration that this happened to her. She's got a lot of evidence to back that up. Is that not something you think the Liberal Party should have taken more seriously, particularly given the issues in Canberra at the moment?
Sure. Well, look, I think it was only a day or so ago that this information came to light. As far as I'm aware, Mr Brooks was pre-selected, 4 or 5 weeks ago, just before the election was underway, and that information was not held. Those allegations had not been made at that time.
269s.
We all know that to be fact. What we do need to allow to happen is the investigation, as I understand, is underway with regard to some of those documents that have been tendered by the individual making the allegation. And let's let that the investigation run its course. And above all else, of course, this information was in the public domain before votes properly started being cast today. So let's see what Tasmanians in Braddon have to say about it. But the party only became aware, like you.
Hi, Tobinator, I think it is.
We have to let,
yeah, I do think it's possible. If they do regain a majority, it'll be possibly 1 or 2 seats. Mind you, there's only 25 seats, so 1 or 2 seats is a lot here. It's possible, but I also think it's possible the Liberals return with nothing. Like no increase, no decrease. And possibly 12. It's pretty close, and it's because of the delay of this election. It's going to be close.
They really seem to suck oxygen out of your campaign.
There's no doubt we had a rocky week and a half at the beginning, Sabra. I think both political parties were off to a rocky start, to be blunt about it. And certainly, we then regrouped, and I think Rebecca White and her team have done an excellent job, and they've been focusing on the issues of health, particularly, which has been dominant throughout the campaign.
Did that, though, I mean, that Labor really struggled during the first 10 days, really, to get any focus on policy at all. It really seemed to took all the headlines away. Will that come back to haunt the campaign, do you think, today?
Well, I think we'll see as the results come in, but there's certainly, I think, in the last week or two, I think things were going Labor's way, and certainly Rebecca White was leading a strong team, and we were focusing really strongly on the health issues of Tasmanians, and there's no doubt we're in the middle of a health crisis, and it'll be interesting to see how Tasmanians vote tonight.
Nick McKim, you've got 2 seats in the Assembly at the moment with Cassie O'Connor and Rosalie Woodruff in Franklin. Rosalie Woodruff only narrowly won her seat last time. What are your chances tonight? Can you actually improve on 2 seats in the Assembly?
I think we can, Guy. I think we can certainly improve on 2 seats. Cassie and Rosalie and their team of candidates have run a very propositional, visionary campaign, a very clear plan for Tasmanians. Unlike both of the other parties, we've had no candidate or internal dramas to do during this
Yeah, you get out the camera.
Wide open, and it's as fluid as I can ever remember it in Tasmania, and I've been around in politics here for a while, and I think there's every chance that Peter Gutman will pull up one short of a majority, and if that's the case, he will have picked one of the great own
Oh, they explain that somewhere.
in history in cynically going for an early election to try and capitalise on a global pandemic.
We're going to pick up on a lot of these themes through the night. Well, as we've already heard, Premier Peter Gutman wants this election to be a referendum on his government's response to COVID-19. But as Alan Coulter reports, other issues like housing and hospitals loom large for many Tasmanians.
I called on the governor.
Yeah, because it's like, this is the, it's not really exactly a reason here, but it's named after Andrew Inglis Clark. I thought it might have been named after someone more recently, but it doesn't particularly look like that's the case. And by the way, so as you're saying earlier, that they use the federal seats for the state seats. They just, instead of electing one person like they do federally, they elect 5 people.
When the next big challenge comes.
The Labor leader Rebecca White has focused on ballooning hospital and housing wait lists.
This election isn't just about what happened in the past week or the past month or the past year. It's about what's happened over the past 7 years of a Liberal government.
On the Liberal ticket, some unlikely partnerships. A former Labor MP turned independent, now wearing blue. The ex-minister brought back in to bring in votes. Labor's lineup caused factional fighting and headlines. The leader was forced to intervene, giving a popular mayor the late call-up.
G'day.
But Labor's troubles with candidates continued. One out of step on key policies.
I will not compromise on principles.
Another told to go over lewd text messages sent years ago.
This appears for all intent as a smear campaign.
The Liberals lost a team member.
That some of these silly restrictions that we're still living under at the moment.
We have a fundamental difference of opinion.
But thought they were kicking goals, avoiding drama. Until their heavy hitter from Braddon, Adam Brooks, was accused of tricking a woman he was dating into believing he was someone else.
He has categorically denied that those profiles are his. Look, I've got more important things to worry about than Mr. Brooks's love life.
Pokies were a hot issue last election, but this time a complete backflip by Labor.
We've struck a number of agreements with different stakeholder groups.
They've absolutely caved in to the pokies lobby.
The Liberals have tried to remain quiet on gaming.
Now, as much as people want to have a rerun of 2018, that policy was dealt with then.
The Liberals hope rebuilding the economy post-pandemic is their ticket to votes, with big promises for big business.
Together, we're going to build a boat.
With some clear air, Labor came out swinging on health.
The Liberal Party's made big promises, but they failed to deliver.
The health package that we are rolling out across the state will ensure that more Tasmanians can get the health care that they need.
Where's the money come from now? Did he win Tats Lotto?
Waiting times for elective surgery and ambulances front of mind for voters.
How does Peter Gutman...
It's been a bit nostalgic. I actually went to Hobart about 2 years ago, so I've actually been a bit familiar with the state. It's not a place many people go. Obviously, it's a bit of out of the way. And Tasmanians watching the stream might know that it's a bit hard to get to Tasmania. You can't drive there. Yeah, well, I guess you can use the ferry, but it's pretty much you only fly there.
But some Liberal stunts fell flat.
Oh, you gotta love media puns, don't you?
Didn't always hit the mark.
Oh, jeez. You know, maybe they should stop calling them dad jokes and start calling them media jokes.
Leaders agree on one thing: they only want majority government.
Now, we've got reporters at each of the party headquarters. Alex Alvaro's at Liberal HQ, just down the hall here at the Grand Chancellor, and Laura Beavis is at Labor HQ at the RACV Hotel.
First to you, Alex, where has the Premier spent the day?
Good evening, Guy. Well, I'm here, as you said, at the Grand Chancellor. This is where people will be coming and gathering, staff and volunteers, to watch the vote come through. There's not many people here just yet, but we're told that they'll be flowing through soon. Now, where the Premier spent the day, he spent the day in Launceston. He cast his vote with his wife, and he again reiterated today that he won't be leading the Liberals unless they win a majority. And I think if he doesn't win that majority, if he doesn't manage to do that, then it will be a big source of embarrassment for the Liberals, as has been said by the panel, if they can't win the majority. So we'll see if that gamble pays off tonight.
Don't be too sure, guys, that the Liberals are going to win a majority. They aren't polling above 50%, so it is possible.
Majority to make that speech, or whether he, does it a little bit earlier. So that'll be one to watch. In terms of the campaign, it has really been a campaign about the Liberals' pandemic, how they've handled the pandemic, how they've handled the economy, what their record is in terms of that, and creating jobs for Tasmanians. And I think this seat in particular will be a really interesting one to watch here in Clark, where a number of high-profile independents are running. So it'll be really interesting to see what the Liberals can do here.
All right, now we're going to go to Laura Beavis. Labor has said it won't govern in minority either, but do they have a realistic expectation that they can get enough seats for a majority?
Well, Sabra, earlier in the campaign, I'm not sure that anyone would have bet on that. Where viewers have just heard about the messy start Labor had to this election campaign, first overlooking and then eventually adding the Kingborough Dean Winter to their Franklin ticket. In Clark, losing party president Ben McGregor as a candidate as a result of what he called inappropriate text messages that he sent several years ago. But after that rocky start, Beck White has really zeroed in on health as a message, and we heard yesterday that she feels that her optimism has just been going up and up as it's resonated with voters. Labor's taken...
Unfortunately, there's been very little polling in this election to make any major guesses about where this is going.
They had a health debate that wasn't attended by the incumbent health minister, the Liberals health spokeswoman Sarah Courtenay, so it was a bit of a one-sided debate. But it does seem to be touching a chord with voters, and Labor's used every opportunity to really hammer on that. It's going to be some interesting seats to watch in Franklin, where Dean Winter was added to the ticket. He's quite high profile and is expected to draw votes, but he might actually drain some away from Labor's sitting member Alison Standen there. In Clark, Labor's got an interesting competition. They started, as of last election, with two Clark members. Then Scott Bacon retired. Madeline Ogilvie came back on a recount but sat as an independent, and now is standing for the Liberals. And because we've got those high-profile independents, particularly Christy Johnson and Sue Hickey, Ms Johnson, who is the Glenorchy mayor in particular, is considered she may draw some votes away from Labor, which might make it hard for them to gain 2 seats in that electorate. And we've also got in Braddon, Justine Cave, a former federal Braddon member, is standing for Labor at a state level. Her high name recognition again may draw Labor votes away from Anita Dow and the other sitting Labor member there. So it will be tricky for them to get above the 2 members in those seats. However, Beck White has been continuing to rule out governing in minority. Of course, it's pretty easy for the opposition.
By the way, just double check with the volume that you guys can hear me clear. I want you to be able to hear this, but then also hear me when I talk. But basically, it's very likely we're going to know. It's very quick. We'll probably very quickly get like 2 Labor, 2 Liberal in a lot of the seats. It will very quickly become known about that. But then that 5th and final seat will likely elude us for a while. It's possible they could get them known. I'll bring up the ABC election calculator as well, because sometimes it's a little faster than them here. And that should hopefully give us the results we want.
Phased out federally in every state and territory except here in Tasmania.
we weren't expecting there to be another tally room event held here after the 2018 election. But despite COVID-19, we're here again, albeit this time it's going to be a seated affair. The man responsible for the tally room is with our reporter on the floor, Leon Compton. Where are you, Leon?
Actually, Guy, I'm not too far from where you're standing right now on the tally room floor. Hello there, it's lovely to see you. And I might take people for a little tour around the tally room, as Sabra mentioned, the last of its kind in the country. Before we get
So I've got the results here for later.
So let's go for a bit of a look around. As I turn around, you can see Guy and Sabra standing there, and our political pundits, of course, on one side of the
It's Newsception.
state political reporter, and Anthony Green over by the board.
Oh, so Anthony Green's actually in the state. I know during the COVID elections last year, he was often just Skyping in.
Mentioned Sabra, it's going to be a little different this year. Last year, this place was filled with political pundits or tragics who came in to watch democracy in the raw. You could be from any part of the political spectrum and all milling here as the night went on. Tonight it'll be seated, so you've got 350 seats arrayed around the floor, and already some of them are starting to fill. A lot of people actually crowding behind you because they're getting in to see the ABC News coverage. Up on the stage behind me, you've obviously got the boards that people will be watching as the count comes in, and there's the podium. And so in a few hours' time, as the vote continues, we're going to have the leaders of both major political parties.
I didn't even know they actually still did these tally rooms. Like, if you guys have watched my old election videos, you would have seen them in the background of some of the, especially the 80s elections. I showed pictures of them. But yeah, I didn't even realise that they got rid of them, and for most places.
Figures to look at this evening that we can start to process. What time will the first vote start coming in?
So we should see some legislative council election figures coming in probably by about 6:30.
I agree. Jackson Wheatland, yeah, Mike Rand was best. And what about Six Scott Mark Latham? We can't forget him as well. They were very entertaining. It's kind of a shame that they're not here. You never know, they might show up.
Has that posed challenges for you at the Electoral Commission?
It has certainly complicated a few of our processes. Certainly, our polling places have to have there are 40 or so that are polling places for both the upper house and the lower house, and so they've had to have new processes and new training equipment and extra materials and extra staff. But we think we're right and ready for the challenge today.
What are we going to know tonight? Will we know who has won in both of those legislative council seats that are up for grabs?
We'll have to wait and see, Leon. There's a reasonable chance we will know or get a really good indication for Derwent. There's only 3 candidates there, but there are 5 candidates and quite a mixture of people up in Windermere and around the Launceston area. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that takes us to a late in the count when we get all our postal votes in.
As we're seeing nationally, there's a growing trend towards pre-poll voting and postal voting. How has that played out here, and what might that mean for what we actually know tonight?
So Tasmania's been a little bit slower than the rest of the country in actually picking up in the early voting, but we certainly had that increase this year. We had to change our postal voting times, so it closed a week early because of changes to delivery times of Australia Post. And with that, we've had an explosion this week where we've gone from 21,000 state pre-poll votes to about 70,000 by the end of the week.
So when you took through the process of counting what is a significant number of those votes, how long will we need to wait until all of those are counted and perhaps the election result is known?
So with the overlap of the 2 elections, we've got one returning officer who's both the returning officer in the upper house and the lower house for one of the divisions. And in that sense, they've got a lot of counting to do. I suspect that the major pre-poll centres, and for example, one polling place in Bass, in Launceston, took 10,000 Bass votes by itself. We'll do some of those counts. So hopefully 50,000...
So the kind of problem is that, like, I want to talk and talk to you guys, but these guys are kind of interesting. I'm kind of interested to hear what they've got to say.
...do on Sunday. So any remaining counts that can't be done tonight will be done tomorrow.
So it is possible that those last seats in each of the electorates might not be known...
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
...until tomorrow or beyond.
Well, again, for the upper house elections, we may know because it's a simpler counting process. Obviously, for the state election with Hare Clark, we certainly will need to go to the 10-day process before we start the Hare Clark, and depending on how the votes flow tonight or fall tonight, we'll get more of an indication for that, but we'll probably have to wait 10 days for some of those closer divisions.
Okay, we haven't got any counts just yet, and I don't think we're going to get any for about another potentially 10 minutes.
Virtually every election I've been involved with, bar one, has been in separate party room functions, and it really is a political bubble, and people are contained in their own little world. The victors become very smug. The losers are devastated and cannot understand how they possibly lost. This is really different because people get to eyeball their political opponents, and it does seem like it's a little bit of a crucible of democracy, but you get to see all sides.
Yeah, it is a little bit special. The other thing that's a bit special about this state, which I think is fantastic, is the banning of the how to votes out at the polling booths. I think that's absolutely fantastic. You can go and give your vote
Interesting.
completely unimpeded. Senator Dunningham, I want to talk to you, especially in the last fortnight, the Premier really tried to hammer home that message about wanting to lead a majority government, and it was essential that people needed to vote accordingly. But from my reading of it, that Labor's message about health, especially in the last week, seemed to really cut through.
Yeah, look, just on majority government, I mean, it is essential that Tasmania is led by a majority government. We've seen what happens when we don't have one, which is why Peter Gutwein has been working as hard as he has, as has Rebecca White, talking about the need for majority government to lead this state. So that's why they've been saying that. And I think voters have heard that message. On to health, a couple of throwaway lines around cuts to health. Big numbers often do catch headlines and catch people's attention. The claim that there was a $1.6 billion cut to health, as has been proposed by the opposition in Tasmania, is not the case. In fact, over the period of time we're talking about, an extra $4 billion has been invested by the government, firstly under Will Hodgman and then under Peter Gutwein. And, you know, we need to examine some of the facts that are actually there rather than swallow the quick 3-second grab that might catch people's attention.
Can I pick you up on the majority government point, though? If a minority is what voters choose, you said right at the start of the coverage, the mob get it right.
Yes, look, voters never get it wrong. That is why we are making it very clear through our campaign. Peter Gutwein has said it every day for the last...
I disagree with that line. I think voters can get it wrong. I think history is full of times of voters voting for people that are not in their best interest. Controversial opinion, I know, but I stand by that statement.
The voting public did return a minority government, which is one of the most disastrous periods in our history. Unemployment rate reached 8.6% or thereabouts. We had scores of people, thousands of people leaving our state, young people unable to find a job, and that's because of the uncertainty minority government brings. Now, yes, you might have two parties together, but at the end of the day, particularly with the Greens, I might say, there is just so much unpredictability around their policies and what it will do to the economy, and that's why majority government is essential.
Senator,
It'll be very interesting to see if the Greens do win in balance of power, whether or not they'll actually form a government or just go to the polls again, because it's quite possible they might end up becoming the new Israel.
Well, good evening, Guy and Sabra and Emily, and to your panel. Today's been a day that's actually not about the politicians running around, it's been about the people of Tasmania, and it's been their opportunity to have their say at the end of what's been a very busy and productive campaign period since late March, and we're very grateful for the fact that we've received a lot of encouragement and support. For me and my wife Julie, we enjoyed quietly lining up and voting at Riverside booth this afternoon, and look, it's been a day noting that Tasmanian state elections are run very differently to other elections. So
well, the ACT is pretty much the same. I don't see why you're trying to act like you're super unique.
Be able to go and vote uninterrupted.
Michael Ferguson, it's Emily Baker here. Tasmania has been lucky to be relatively COVID safe for quite a long time now, but you've been campaigning on this message of how Peter Gutwein handled the pandemic. Talk me through the strategy there, and talk me through how you managed that without actually just spooking Tasmanians into worrying about what might be around the corner.
Oh, calm down, John.
Tasmania under the leadership of Peter Gutwein.
That's not appropriate. Tasmania's a lovely place. Don't.
He's been decisive, and in fact, not just following health advice, but also in those very early days, his instinct was to protect, and the early border closure was.
Oh, you've referred to senators.
Well ahead of the other
yes,
states.
yes. So obviously, but I mean, but this isn't. They're not talking federally here. We're talking statewide, and statewide, both Tasmania and ACT have 5 electorates of 5 members. The one difference is Tasmania has an upper house.
We saw the civil war unfold in the early part of the campaign in the Labor Party. So it's an important contrast because the simple fact is we don't know.
I don't know, like, I think Tasmania likes to think they're very special and like they're like a really important place. Although, I think a lot of the country forgets they exist. Rest in peace, all the maps that forget to put Tasmania on there.
Announced during this election campaign. The plan's working.
But like I've been to Tasmania. I was there in 2019, and Hobart is a lovely city. As someone from Adelaide who really likes Adelaide, I was almost tempted to say I almost liked Hobart better in some places. Although it's a bit remote, there's not much there, but it was still a lovely city to visit and work in for a few weeks.
The Braddon candidate Adam Brooks has potentially falsified a driver's license, that he's facing criminal allegations in a court. How can you accept that, and do you accept that personally?
Well, Emily, I think this has been well planned.
Now, I can't remember where Cradle Mountain is.
Allegations have been made, and Mr. Brooks is well and truly on the record as not accepting and denying these allegations. And
No. New Zealand is Australia's Tasmania.
have had their opinions about those allegations and the denial, and their voice is what matters most tonight. And I look forward to seeing the results come in.
Why would you want to kick Tasmania out of the Union, out of the Commonwealth? Like, seriously.
I see a strong result tonight, and importantly, I'm very hopeful that Tasmanians share with us the importance of majority and stable government, because we know that in Tasmania, with the Hare-Clark system, it's more or less designed to have close elections, but the risk of minority is real. And so we do hope that we get a great result tonight.
Minority governments aren't bad. Like, I generally feel like there's this fear of minority governments, and I feel like if it's arguably some respects better to have a bit of a crossbench just to keep the government in check.
And if we are honoured with success tonight, we won't let them down. We'll work our guts out every single day to deliver our plan and keep people in work and look after training and ensure that we continue to have a strong economy and funding those essential services.
Thank you, Michael Ferguson.
Now it's just gone 6:30. We're still waiting on the first results to come in here to the tally room.
Yep, nothing's coming just yet.
Hobart, and we're going to stick in Bass for the moment. We're going to talk now with Michelle.
We should hopefully have a good idea in an hour. So in the next hour we're going to start seeing all the results. So if you just tuned in now, it's a good time. You can obviously go back to the early part of my video if you want to see the explanation. But as for the vote count, this should be coming in very soon.
But I can talk about how it's felt on the doors for the last 3 weeks, and it's been an incredibly positive campaign for Labor. A lot of conversations around the things that matter to people, about health, about housing. 1 in 8 people are on a waiting list.
So John, my likely prediction is we're going to get the same result we got last time. Possibly one more for the Liberals.
Getting some first figures in. Anthony, tell us, what have you got?
It's one polling.
Oh, here we go. We got the first polls.
In the Northern Midlands, 2.7 quotas for the Liberal Party. Labor 2. The shooters, fishers, and farmers are running third there at the moment. Just to look at the change in vote, it is only one polling place.
Oh my goodness, Labor's what now?
Only one polling place, but I just always say with election coverages, when I see the first voter.
What do you guys think of these these first seat counts? We just like get the ridiculous numbers that make absolutely no sense. Like you get ridiculous swings and stuff because it's like, oh my goodness, one person decided to vote Liberal this time. Oh my goodness, Liberal up 50%.
How confident are you that you can retain 2 seats in Bass tonight?
I'd be fairly confident. I'm fairly confident Labor's going to hold 2 seats in all of them.
That we can maintain those 2 seats in Bass. We do need to. That's an important pathway to us achieving majority government, and that's something that Labor's campaigned very strongly for. It has been a difficult campaign for us up here in Bass. We've obviously had a significant loss in my family, and I do...
What's that thing about the Senate? Yeah, Terminator. I'm personally not a huge fan of how Tasmania sends over twice as many people to the Senate than they do to the lower house. It always, to me, seems a little ridiculous. I also think our state of South Australia is also drastically overrepresented. In reality, I think in an ideal system, New South Wales and Victoria should be able to send possibly 3 more senators, and South Australia and especially Tasmania should send in less senators. But unfortunately, the Senate treats a state as a single thing as opposed to by its population, and it's a flaw that we're going to probably be living with for a very long time.
Campaign on our policies, and we've been really comfortable with the policies that we've been talking about, and they've been the conversations that people have had on the door. I know that the Premier decided to take an election very quickly. He created a circumstance whereby he could legitimately dissolve the parliament off the back of wanting to get that COVID response they had in WA. That is absolutely not what we've heard on the Dorts. And we've worked really hard to make sure that, that our policies meet those expectations of people, and people want health to be sorted. They want people to be housed. They want to have a safe environment. And all of those issues have played really strongly. And with the revelations in the last couple of days, they also want women to be safe and women to be respected.
Michelle, you have campaigned as a party really heavily on health, including outside the Launceston General Hospital in your electorate. Now, the criticism that's easy for...
Oh no, Tobinator, are you quoting friendly Geordies again? I think we talked about this last week. We're trying to avoid talking about that guy.
Campaign do you think this spectre of that period of time?
Look, we've not had a lot of that. The only people we hear talking about are the Liberal Party, and that's because obviously we made some difficult decisions, some really hard decisions during the global financial...
Look, I'm kind of mixed on the Senate. I like having two houses with the ability to basically keep one in check and prevent one just passing whatever they want. But I can see also arguments on why having just one house is better. Or you can go with like New Zealand, we have the Senate and the House together. Do I think the Shooters can win a seat? I don't know, like, they've done quite well in New South Wales, but I don't know how well they'll do in other states. I really need to see them, like, if they can do well in Queensland and Victoria, maybe. I don't know about Tasmania. It's also the issue that it's all about those quotas, and not only does this format of seats make it hard for majority governments, I don't think it's also somewhat hard for other ones to win, because the quotas, the big party quotas, will often just kick out the small parties. So there hasn't really been an independent elected in the last few elections in Tasmania, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just quickly double check.
That the two of them would get up and I might not. That's the way that it plays. But most importantly, every single person, those candidates you've mentioned, but also Adrian Hines is a phenomenal new candidate, and Owen, who I've so much respect for, who's been campaigning for us and all these. Everyone has worked really hard.
So there was no independents elected in 2018. No independents elected in 2014. No independents elected in 2015, 2010. Yeah, there's not really been anyone else, pretty much since 2002 at least. Every election's either been won by Labour, Liberal or the Greens. This could be some results now, actually. I'm going to shut up for a bit and let's listen to the results.
Here's what the 105 candidates at this election are vying for. The 25 seats in Tasmania's House of Assembly. The Parliament building was completed in 1840 using sandstone quarried at nearby Salamanca Place and Queen's Gardens.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I do know about South Australian premiers, mostly just the recent ones. I have been interested in potentially doing topics on that, although I just don't think those videos would do super well. That's why I've been a bit uneasy about doing those elections.
Hi, and I'm Sabra Lane as well. Let's go back to Anthony Green. Anthony, you've got some more information for us?
Look, we're just getting very early figures.
Fantastic. Australia's the only Commonwealth country to have two democratically elected independent houses. Oh yeah, that's right, because Canada doesn't elect their Senate, Britain doesn't elect their Lords, and New Zealand doesn't even have an upper house, I believe.
Very small ones.
I definitely think we have one of the best election systems in the world. There's possibly a few ways you can fix it, and I just mentioned the Senate one earlier. But, yeah, I think...
Not much change on the numbers we're seeing so far.
Who is your favourite SA Premier and why? Well, obviously Mike Rand from the last live stream. He is obviously the best Premier we ever had. Full stop. But in seriousness, I did like Jay Weatherall a lot. Our last Premier was a nice guy. As I say, for the older ones like Don Dunstan or John Bannon, I can't really speak of because I don't know too much about them. Also, they were before my time.
Traditionally favour the Conservative parties. Is that the same?
That's the way it works out. I'll bring up Bass just as an example. We've got the Liberal, it's only 94 votes, you see. We've got the Liberal Party on 4 quotas, something like 70% of the vote. They're little tiny rural booths where the Liberal Party normally do very well. So that's what we correct for that on the statewide figures. But it'll just take a while for that to settle down. You get a bit backwards and forwards in the numbers. But yeah, it's a standard thing all around the country. Small booths are counted first. Small booths are usually likely to be most rural. and they tend to be very strong for the Conservative side of politics. So that's why early figures tend to favour the Liberal Party, and then they change during the rest of the evening.
Julie Collins, we heard earlier from Michael Ferguson, having somewhat of a subtle dig on Rebecca White, saying that people should be voting for Peter Gutwein based on stronger leadership, saying that Rebecca White was a little wishy-washy on COVID. What's your reply to that?
That's absolutely not the case. Rebecca White's a very strong leader, and I think the Labor Party have campaigned hard. As I said, I think we had, both major parties had a bit of a mess at the beginning, but we certainly, campaigned very, very hard, and health is certainly resonating out there, so is the housing crisis. And they're two important issues. The infrastructure, the mythical bus mall that's never been built in Hobart. People are concerned that the government hasn't delivered when it comes to health, housing and the infrastructure.
Just picking up on the point that we heard earlier from Michelle O'Byrne, that Janie Finlay and Jennifer Houston could be vying for that second seat there in Bass. What's your reaction to that? Someone like Jennifer Houston, who has tremendous life experience, 6 kids. She also has had serious illness dealing with that and her family as well. It would be a shame in a way to see that kind of loss from Parliament, someone who has great world experience.
Yeah, it would be a shame, and certainly, it is very difficult for those candidates that don't get returned. As we have every Hare Clark election, there are always some people that miss out.
Let's say this 5-seat prayer system can be a bit weird, because I'm not sure if you guys were here for the Tasmania, the ACT election. The Greens won a weird, abnormal amount of the votes because of how they had done their preferences. So don't expect the preference numbers to necessarily reflect the seat numbers, because how people assign their votes is very interesting. Thoughts on Stephen Marshall? Stephen Marshall's somewhat of a wet fish, I would usually say. He's not that impressive and he's not really that bad, but interestingly, he's not super popular in my state. My state is very likely to vote him out next election if things don't turn around for him. So it'll be very interesting.
There was still, of course, a lockdown in Northwest.
Yeah, like SA has a big environmental. Like we've always been a big leader in green energy, so Stephen Marshall would be an idiot to not support it, which is why you probably think he looks very good on the energy issues. And so he definitely is. Again, he's the first Liberal Premier in 16 years, so he's obviously going to err on certain left-wing policies to try and stay in power.
Trying to pick up 4 seats in Bass with the Premier and 2 senior ministers there. How hopeful are you that you will achieve that?
I think, John, that you pretty much hit the nail on the head of what sort of guy Marshall is. He's a very plain Liberal guy. He arguably only won the last election because they'd redone the seats to favour the Liberals after in 2014 Labor won with a really low amount of the vote. So it's kind of been difficult for him to stay relevant, and yes, COVID has given him a benefit, but not as much.
Picking up majority government for a third consecutive.
Yeah, you understand with SA is Adelaide is everything. He who wins Adelaide wins the state, and so Liberals win the country seats with like 80% of the vote, but then Labor just wins Adelaide and wins government. So that's one of the problems.
We're crossing to you at the Brunswick Hotel.
Let's watch a bit of this interview.
Big smile on your face. Tell us what you're feeling tonight.
I feel like we should be talking more about the Tasmanian election. We're talking more about my state. Look, we'll come to my state elections in due time. Although one of the big problems about when we come to my election is I'll very likely want to watch the election at a party with my fellow members and not particularly live stream it. So I'll have to decide on whether or not I'll do that or do a live stream. If you guys really want me to do a live stream, I might, but I'm unsure about it. I possibly could do a recap if you guys are interested. We could like recap the election afterwards if you guys are interested in that.
We've seen her mostly outside of her electorate, including in Bass and in Clark. Why have you focused on having Rosalie in those places instead of campaigning in her own electorate of Franklin?
Well, for starters, Emily, Rosalie has been campaigning really hard in her electorate of Franklin, door knocking, doing street chats,
But obviously, when we've got election announcements to make, there's 2 sitting MPs. Rosalie, who's an incredibly effective and talented Green representative, is the perfect person to be representing us.
And talk to me about your candidate selection. So you've obviously got Vicar Bailey, who used to run the Wilderness Society here in Tasmania, running with you.
Okay, so the ABC hasn't called any of the seats yet. We're only at about 0.6% counted. In fact, Franklin and Clark have got no results back yet. Clark will probably be the slowest because it's an urban electorate. I forget which one. Franklin's the one. That's right. Franklin's also got parts of Hobart in it. So currently we're just getting the northern ones: Bass, Braddon, and Lyons.
And a really important part of our campaign. But ultimately, that was Vicker's decision to put his hand up for Clark. I'm really stoked about it, and the pre-selection panel thought it was great to have him there too. We've also got, I might just say, in Lyons, a fantastic candidate in Liz Johnson, who's been part of the heart and work of that electorate for a very long time, and I'm really hopeful tonight that we'll see a good result for Liz.
And so acknowledging then that it was Vicker's decision, did that give you any concern, Cassie?
No, not at all. I'm so proud that someone of Vicker's calibre and quality would put their hand up to run for the Greens. It takes real guts to run for Parliament. I think it takes extra guts to put your hand up for the Greens, and I've just felt...
Small comments. Does Tasmania vote roughly the same federally and state? I know federally they can be a bit of a weird wild card. If you remember the 1983 election, they elected everyone Liberal in the same election. Bob Hawke won by a landslide. But they also have Braddon and Bass are famous in federal elections for constantly voting the other party in. They'll vote Labor, then Liberal, then Labor, then Liberal, then Labor, then Liberal. It's a very common thing they often do, those 2 seats, from what I hear.
Named after former Premier Sir Edward Braddon, the seat is spread over nearly a third of the state, with agricultural districts in the north and mining and wilderness areas on the west coast. This is Tasmania Votes live on ABC TV and local radio in Tasmania and nationally on the news channel.
I resent Tas because I had to play a rugby game there in 2-degree weather. I could imagine that.
Just say first off, we started to colour in our map. We declared Peter Gutwin elected in Brass.
Yes, Tasmania has a thing for voting against the incumbents.
So it's not hard to declare them elected. But Braddon, if we look at the party totals, now a lot of this is coming from Central Coast, Circular Head and King Island, so they're quite remote parts of the district. The Liberals on 3.4, Labor 1.1. Now this ungrouped, I'll have to explain, just to explain that we're showing party totals, but behind them are the votes for the individual candidates themselves. Jeremy Rockcliffe, far and away top of the ticket. Craig Garland is a fisherman from Montague on the northwest coast. Now, the last by-election in Braddon and the last state election, he polled very well in the small communities in the northwest, and his vote just dropped down afterwards. So I'm not expecting that he'll be polling 11% by the end of the night, but that's still up on his vote in the same areas from last time. Felix Ellis is second on the Liberals from Adam Brooks. Look at the change in vote that's occurring in those areas.
Ooh.
And there's not much of a change.
Now we can't talk too much about this, but the Libs can't really afford to lose votes in this election. They just can't. If they do, they're a minority government.
Not much is going on there, but I just thought up that's 1.9% counted. The Liberal Party were pretty sure they're going to get 3 anyway. So there's no
Just double checking.
Labor vote is currently depressed. We expect that.
Last election, the Liberals won 50.26% of the vote, and they're currently polling at 41. So they could potentially lose 10% of the vote, which would be very bad for them.
Yeah, 45 minutes in, that's pretty impressive, I've got to say. But I think
so we don't know. It could change. We're very early votes at the moment, so we don't know where this is going.
Members, both of them serving since I think about 2002.
By the way, just double checking with some of the people that are now on. Are any of you guys Tasmanians, or are you guys all from the mainland like me?
Much has been made of the government trying to cash in on the handling of the COVID pandemic. I think the Premier and his ministers have been at pains to point out that it's because of the efforts of Tasmanians that we are in the situation we're in, the shape that we're in, and the fact that we have had relative peace in pandemic terms. So, look, it's a pleasing result, and I hope it sort of continues for us, but it's great to see Peter and Jeremy back in seats in Parliament.
It might be due to Tasmanians that we're safe and COVID-free, but it's certainly due to the government that we've gone to an early election. And looking at those results, Adam Brooks looks like he might be struggling. Are there indicators from the booths where those votes have come from that perhaps suggest that that Adam Brooks won't pick up a quota, and might that actually be a blessing in disguise for you?
Look, I mean, it is very early days. We are, I think, in those Braddon booths, we were at 1.9%. It is very early on. We'll see what happens as we move across the coast to some of the bigger booths as well. And I think I'll leave the commentary until then. Having said that, though, I mean, look, when Adam Brooks was elected last time round, events did happen. We've canvassed them already. I expect that would probably result in some votes going to other candidates, as you'd expect from 2018. But let's see what happens. He's still a very popular man. I've been spending time up there door knocking on the northwest coast, and the reception's been incredibly positive for all of our candidates. So
even based on those early booths, it looked like his personal vote was down about 6%.
Yeah, well, as I say, only early numbers yet, and they are small booths in fairly remote parts of Braddon. So let's see what happens as we get into Wynyard, Burnie, Ulverston, Devonport areas, particularly where Adam Brooks...
Oh, hello, Shane.
Devonport end of the coast where
I'm actually... I don't know, Shane, about the... where I think the... who will win the election. It's possible we could see a minority government. I do think it's very possible we could see a minority government. I wouldn't be surprised if the Tasmanian Liberals were a little too overconfident going into this election that they didn't cover some of their bases. And by the way, Shane, I was going to also say, apologise that I really feel like I should have covered the Queensland election. I did cover the NT election last year, but the live stream was so bad I decided to skip out on doing the next two. And it's only after the success of the WA election that I decided to try and do this one again. Although... this one election is probably not going to be as crazy as the WA election, so I do apologise that we're probably not going to have as crazier results as we got there. Yes, we do. We do have our first ALP, and that will be in the seat of Lyons, which, surprise, surprise, it's Rebecca White, their leader. So she's been re-elected, which is good for her.
He's very decisive and, as I say, wants to make sure that he does the job that he has to the best of his ability, and I believe he has done that.
Here's a question for you guys. If the Greens do end up holding the balance of power, yeah, I'm curious. If the Greens win the balance of power, do you think the Liberals will side with them, Labor will side with them, Liberals and Labor will side with each other, or do you think they'll force another election? You want to talk about Joseph Lyons, Tasmania's one and only Premier? I would say well before my time, so I would have very little idea of what sort of guy he was. Jeez please, those election videos on him are very old. It's hard to remember what he was like back then. But I'd say, like, he seemed like a nice guy, but as someone who's a supporter of the Labor Party, and as someone who, abandoned the Labor Party because they didn't do what he wanted, it's difficult to fully appreciate him. He does come across as a bit of a traitor in some respects.
Good evening, Philippa.
Hi, Leon. How you going?
Why have you decided to come down tonight?
This is my first trip to the tally room. I'm really interested in local politics. I'm really interested in democracy.
Hey, no. You can't be interested in local politics. That's me. I'm the one that's interested in local politics.
So you're here from the electorate.
It's unbelievable.
For you, what were the big issues in this campaign?
I think the way the election came about was really interesting to me. The fact that what was a stable government was somehow manipulated, I thought, by the sitting government.
Interesting.
But in Franklin, local
I didn't know you knew that much about Lyons, John.
Labor seems to have some really good policies about that. I travel on the Southern Outlet every day. That's sometimes really difficult. Just things like that. But the way this election's come about,
it's been an issue for you.
Yeah.
And just a final question, you obviously follow your politics. What is your expectation about how the vote will play out statewide tonight?
Look, I think it's going to be close. I think I don't think the Liberal Party are going to get away with calling the election the way they did and relying on what's happened in other states during COVID.
I totally agree with her on that one, by the way.
Thank you, Philippa, and good night.
Thanks.
It's 5 to 7, and we've now got 1% of the vote counted.
Ooh.
And with an update on the seat of Lyons.
Let's have a look at the update.
Check in with that.
Well, Lyons, the big central electorate, which we've is Rebecca White's seat, and we've declared her elected. But before we get on to that, these are the sitting members for Lyons. 3 Liberals, Guy Barnett, Mark Shelton, and John Tucker, who was elected at a recount and re-hitting design.
What a name, John Tucker.
On the mainland, casual vacancies is filled by recounts in Tasmania, not by by-elections. And on the Labor ticket, we've got Rebecca White and Jen Butler. We're confident looking at the party totals. The Liberals are above 3 quotas as expected. Labor's votes on 1.5, the Greens 0.64. Shooters, fishers and farmers are doing quite well at the moment on 6%, but these are very small polling places that are in, and I expect that they won't do quite as well in the larger towns. But on the leaders, on the
Swings.
leading candidates,
Oh, no.
Guy Barnett is on that. Let's look at the Liberal ticket. But just to explain how the system works again for people on the main.
Yeah, this is the interesting part. Listen to this, guys.
On the Liberal ticket in a column on the ballot paper, we've got them listed there in descending vote order. On election day, those candidates are randomised. They're in different orders from ballot paper to ballot paper. So there's no donkey vote on the ballot paper. It's evenly spread across all 6 weeks. While the ballot paper looks like a Senate ballot paper, the voters determine the order of election because there's no ticket voting. So on the Liberal ticket, we've got Guy Barnett's well ahead as he is at previous elections. Mark Shelton is second ahead. Stephanie Cameron is ahead of John Tucker, but this is a very regional electorate. You need to know which part of the electorate the votes are from. But if I look at the Labor ticket, Rebecca White is dominating her party's vote. She's got over a quarter in her own right, no doubt being elected. And then an even split across the other 4 candidates. Jen Butler was elected on surpluses from Rebecca White last time, and other preferences.
That's pretty much how it works.
At this stage, it's looking 3-2. 3 Liberal, 2 Labor in Lyons as before. But at this stage,
I missed that part.
Anthony, a short time ago there was a strap that appeared on the screen that said that there are 61,000 pre-poll votes, which was nearly double the previous number. Will that delay?
I know the major parties have made a bunch of statements about not aligning with third-place security. Yes. It is very likely, Terminator, that another election could be forced. I don't think so. I think one of them will bite the nose, and I suspect it'll more likely be Labour than the Greens. But it is interesting. It really depends on which party is hated the most out of the 3. I don't think they're going to call another election. We're not Israel. We're not going to just keep calling elections until Benjamin Netanyahu goes to prison.
So that tends to be the way we post the vote.
Ah, yes. You guys keep quoting my old videos. Like, I really don't remember a lot about my World War II election videos. They are very old videos. By the way, did you guys have a chance to watch the 2013 election? Feel free to tell me in the comments what you thought of the 2013 election video, if you guys enjoyed that or not. I, as a Labour supporter, didn't particularly enjoy writing that election, and that's why it partly took a while to come out, but on the bright side, we've only got 2 more to go, and hopefully I should be able to have one done in May and the last one done in June. I'm actually tempted, if you guys are interested, to do a live stream for the 2019 election where I watch all the previous ones up until 2019 and talk about how I made them and stuff, if you guys were interested in that idea.
Definitely 3 seats for the Liberals in Bass. There's definitely a seat for the Labor Party in Bass. The 5th seat, even on these very early numbers, looks like it could be quite close, and particularly as Michelle O'Byrne does look like she's polling quite strongly for Labor.
Oh, thank you, John.
That may mean enough of a discrepancy amongst the Labor ticket that would create some opportunity for us to come in and win the 5th seat in Bass. So early days, but so far so good.
You say there's a swing to you. Where is the swing coming from?
Well, interestingly, we haven't got any Clark or Franklin numbers in, and generally when our vote comes on or comes back, it would come on to a greater degree.
Okay, so Liberals are having an upswing in Lyons.
The small moves are showing.
So let's go party totals. So, okay, so Liberals are up +6. Labour are down -8 and Greens are down -1%. So currently looking good for the Libs, but it's still young. We don't know where those swings are going to go.
I think we certainly deserve to win it, Emily. Whether we will win it or not, we'll just have to wait and see. And look, to be honest, It wouldn't surprise me if the fifth seat in Bass is one of the ones that we don't know at the end of the night tonight. And along those lines, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yes, Terminator, rip Kevin 07. Oh, thank you, Red Knight. I'm looking forward to doing it. It should be better than these live streams. These live streams are a little awkward because I have long periods where I'm not talking. And of course, I can't just keep talking forever. So that's why I always find this stuff. Josh, with Rudd challenging, he basically he wanted to challenge earlier, but just didn't have the support. And it wasn't until Labor realised that they weren't going to win with Gillard that they finally let Rudd take over again. But in reality, I got the idea generally that Labor never really wanted Rudd to come back because he was a bit too domineering. And they always wanted Gillard, but unfortunately Australia didn't.
Smaller booths, and you're getting lots of votes up from here around the Circular Head Council. You're getting some from Central Coast, but all the small rural booths, nothing from Devonport, nothing from Ulverston, Warwick, White Wynyard or Burnie yet. Let's look at the party totals here. Actually, I'll show, just so everyone knows who we're talking about. There are 3 Liberals and 2 Labor members. Jeremy Rockcliffe is always the highest polling candidate. He's the Deputy Premier. Roger Jensch was the 3rd elected last time. And Felix Ellis came in a recount, at a second recount after Adam Brooks resigned. Adam Brooks is back on the ballot paper this time, but he's not a sitting member at this election. And Anita Dow and Shane Broad are on the Labor ticket. Let's look at the party totals. The Liberals are on over 3 quotas, which is as we expected. These numbers are not updated from the last time I looked. Let's see if I can bring them up again. Usually there's a little bit of a lag in the updates as they come through. No, they're not updating. At the moment, the Labor vote has risen since the last update, so I won't go on too far with this. But it's certainly looking like 3 Liberal, definite one.
Have a shot when Anthony Green has a technical problem.
But at this stage, that's in Braddon. Just look at the leading candidates. As I said, this hasn't updated. Felix Ellis is polling very well, but he is from the far northwest at this stage. He's not from the Burnie Devonport end of that election. And Adam Brooks is trailing him. But as I said, there's votes further along the coast coming yet.
Thank you very much for that, Anthony. Firstly, I'm going to go to you, Julie Collins,
What?
because we didn't get your take earlier on Rebecca White clearly getting that number 1.
What do you mean hamburger?
You must be happy with that, but by the same token, you might be struggling with the second seat there.
Is there some recent meme that I missed?
We'll get 2 seats in lines. I think Rebecca has run a great campaign and she's a very strong lead candidate for the Labor Party.
Again, I think Labor will win 2 seats in all the electorates. Question is, will he win 3? I'm not too keen. Not too sure. I think Labor's really the best bet. I think at this point is Greens to win 1 in 3, Labor to win 2 in all of them, and that will give them a majority if they go with the Greens. Well, at least it will leave the Greens with the balance of power.
I agree with that, John O'Dunningham. And the other point I want to pick up on the last seat that we looked at with Braddon, that Felix Ellis is doing quite well. Does that surprise you that he's doing better than the sitting minister there?
Look, just on Felix, I'm not surprised that he's doing well. He's an affable, approachable kind of guy, and I know he has been working extremely hard while becoming a new father during the campaign as well. He managed to sort of squeeze that in around the job of door knocking, but he's been out and about ever since he got elected. It's only been a short period of time.
August last year. He is a newbie. For people who are outside Tasmania, this guy only was sworn in August last year, and he pointed out that he was the first MP born after the fall of the Berlin Wall, I think. And
yes.
So he's a young guy.
A very young guy, but look, really a real trailblazer and doing a great job up there. And I think the other issue with Lions, is that right? Yeah. So look, notionally the leader of a major political party always does poll well and draw in another candidate as well. So while again it is early days, I will look to see how Rebecca White does poll and what that does mean for a second candidate. I know it was close between Janet Lambert and Jen Butler last time round. So
still no results from Clark, which I won't be mispronouncing as Denison because I'm not from there.
As always happens in the Hare-Clark system, we see swings and roundabouts for all parties where candidates from a particular party take votes away from each other. the upside for you is Felix Ellis. The downside is Roger Yench. At the moment, again, we have to preface everything that they're only early votes, but it looks like he's in trouble there.
Look, again, yes, as you say, early votes. The aim of any political party at...
I definitely find Tasmania has a very like they're very attached to people. That's why people like Jackie Lambie and Mr. Wilkie have been very popular figures in Tasmania, because it's very much a lot more about the person. Whereas I feel like South Australia, we're a lot more about the party. So we elect people based on their party, not because of having a cult of personality around them.
As we head east along Braddon.
I wonder, Senator, we've seen Felix Ellis run a really interesting campaign, and as you say, become a new father during that. The baby has a very similar name to the former Premier, which you have probably picked up on too. In fact, the same name. So what future do you see for someone like Felix Ellis in the Liberal Party?
Well, look, Felix, I think, has demonstrated he's committed to getting out and amongst those people he seeks to represent. It has been a short period of time, as I was discussing with Sabra, and he wants to make sure that when he does come down to Hobart out of Braddon, he's taking the views of those he represents down with him. So I think that will be a hallmark of his career, whatever shape it takes on from here. It really is about getting out and about and finding...
Here's a question for you guys. Do you think the Greens are going to gain votes this election? They've been on a bit of a downhill since
thank you for that.
since I think they hired in 2010. It's been interesting to see if they do make a comeback, because it's really, I feel like they're going to be the key factor in this election, not Jackie Lambie. My opinion on Jackie Lambie is that she's a very populist figure, but like the good kind of populist, not like the crazy conservative populist or the crazy liberal one. Like, she says some dumb things, but she then passes some good policy. So generally, I like her. I'm glad she's in the Senate. I think she's a much better choice in the Senate than a lot of other parties. So I'm very I very much like her, just today, yeah. Although, as I say, I'm usually a Labour supporter, so obviously I don't like her more than I'd say I like, which... I do not know what I'm saying.
That's going to slide down towards 58-59%, so that makes it hard to get to a fourth seat. Labor's on 1.38, so we're projecting they'll increase, and the Greens are on 0.53. But if I look, bring up the leaders, this is all the candidates leading, and Peter Gutwin has got 3 quotas in his own right. This includes Weymouth, which is, I think, where he's from, if I'm remembering correctly. If we just look at the Labor ticket, what's interesting on the Labor ticket is Janie Finlay's a new candidate, is well known in the electorate. She's leading the ticket ahead of Michelle O'Byrne, Adrian Hunt and Jennifer Houston. Is 4th on the ticket at the moment. Now, these are not very representative polling places.
I'm not sure what you're saying. Oh,
in West Tamar, and that's what will decide the election. But at the moment, Janie Finlay's doing very well in that electorate, but it still looks like 3 Liberals, at least 1 Labor, more likely...
Fun fact, James Finlay is the guy who does all the election openings, so not related, I'm pretty sure. Although you never know.
There's an issue of who the second Labor candidate to be elected is.
All right, thanks for that, Anthony. And Jennifer Houston, thank you very much for joining our coverage tonight. Even on that run-through of information there from Anthony,
it's interesting that William McWilliams, the first national leader, was from Tasmania, because the Nationals basically have no presence in this state anymore.
Well, it's here, Clark, and anything can happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Lachlan, about Jackie Lambie. Like, the Clive Palmer party, if you'll learn about soon, basically just existed as get Clive into Parliament and get him a bunch of supporters. Really, his supporters were just independents trying to run off him to get money, so they were always basically just independents.
We campaign all the time and we're in the community all the time, and certainly the feedback we've been getting on the doors and the phones has been really positive. There's been a lot of people concerned about health, and that's been our major push, and that's what we're hearing back from the community.
Jennifer, it's Emily Baker here. Tell me, if you do lose your seat tonight, you did bring a different lens, I think, to the Tasmanian Parliament. You're a Tasmanian Indigenous woman. You have You had a teen pregnancy, you have a community sector background. What kind of talent do you think you brought to the Parliament, and do you think that that's lacking more broadly in Tasmania's House of Assembly?
I think there's certainly a lack of diversity on the other side of the chamber at the moment. The government has a lack of diversity. There's a great deal of diversity in the Labor team. I brought something different. I am the first Indigenous woman to have ever sat in that Parliament, first Tasmanian Indigenous woman anyway. And I think I did bring a different angle to that. But I think there's also a lot of work still to be done out in the community if I don't get a seat.
And Jennifer, you've picked up on my next question there. If you were to lose your seat tonight, what comes next for you?
Could be anything.
And let's talk about pre-selection. We saw Janie Finlay come in on the Labor ticket. She wasn't a Labor member for very long at all before she was chosen to run. How did that feel for you, or how did that look to you as a sitting MP?
That's not terribly unusual, especially when we've got a very short time frame for elections. So it's not unusual to bring in people who have Labor values, who for one reason or another haven't previously been.
Thoughts on Bob Brown? He seems like a nice guy. I'm not I probably appreciated the Greens more in the old days than they did today. Like I say, Bob Brown seemed like a nice guy, but like it's hard. Like, I'm having a lot of trouble replying to these questions. Maybe you should stop asking them. I can't seem to answer them properly. But let's instead go to the next question. Finish with Brian. Which prediction for tonight? Well, I was predicting either Libs to remain with their current handings or possibly pick up one seat or lose one seat. So anywhere, same. So basically to stay the same, plus or minus one. Does Clive head a base anywhere? Look, Clive will possibly. Actually, no. Recently, I'd probably say Clive's actually probably lost his base thanks to the Queensland election. So I wouldn't be too surprised if he doesn't really have a base anymore. But there will always be someone who'll just vote him out of memes.
The Labor Party on 32.8, Greens 13.6. Shooters, fishers and farmers at the moment are doing quite well on 3.5%. But I suspect that's because of the rural nature of a lot of the early figures. If we're looking at the change in vote on the polling places, we're seeing there's a drop in the Green, the Liberal vote, a rise in the Green vote, and a bit of a swapping around amongst the other parties. At the moment, we're giving, that's the same votes that's got to the chamber, we're giving away at the moment 6 seats to the Liberal Party. We're confident they've got at least 2 seats in 3 of the electorates. We're giving Labor Party 3 seats. There's a long way to go yet. But at this stage, the overall summary, we haven't got any figures from Clark yet. And the only polling place we got from Franklin is Southport, which is the most southerly polling place in the country. So it's not always very indicative of the rest of the electorate. So at the moment, we just the 3 electorates where the Liberal Party do well. There's a small drop in the Liberal vote. We haven't got anything from Hobart yet, so I think it's.
So I say it's possible they could go into minority government. Depends on how small the drop is.
The 3 electorates they hold at the moment, but we've got nothing from Hobart.
All right, Anthony, thanks for that. John O'Dunningham, you still feeling confident?
Well, look, I feel very confident that
of course you do.
Have looked to a Premier that has led the state through unusual and unprecedented circumstances. I mean, we've got to remember there is no how-to manual sitting on the shelf for events like the ones our country, our world has just been through. And so I think that people, when they went to the ballot box, would have looked to indeed how the last 12 months, 18 months have gone in this state, but also then to the plan and what has been announced by the parties in terms of what they do for the next 4 years.
There was a big difference though in this.
Do you guys think the Liberals are relying too heavily on COVID? That speech does sound like they're very much like we handled COVID, vote for us.
We saw state leaders there that fought against Scott Morrison as well as dealing with COVID. That was sort of interpreted too by voters as sort of pushing back against the feds. You didn't have that here. Is that?
Well, look, I think that it's safe to say that, and we saw the reports out of National Cabinet every week, twice a week when they were happening twice weekly. It was not always a unanimous agreement across the states, and I know Peter did have a difference of opinion with the Commonwealth from time to to time. But look, that is the nature of these things. There is another important difference between Western Australia and Queensland and, of course, what we're now going to do.
Wonder if it'll affect the
We've
vote.
talked about a lot tonight, and that's the Hare-Clark electoral system, which does bring about perhaps a different range of results that you might see in
Possibly. I do think that these recent elections have shown a very big detachment between federal and state governments. So if people see... Oh, well, wait for this.
Which looks a bit odd because the Liberal Party have got 51%. Now, this is Sandy Bay. So for people in other states, you think Dalkeith, Kew, Vaucluse, it's like the most Liberal party of Denison, of Tasmania, to be honest. And the Liberal Party's first, the Greens second, then Suweki and Labor Party fourth. Clark is a very mixed electorate. Very solid Labor north of the Domain, very mixed to the south, with very strong pockets of Liberal voting. So,
yeah, I think there's a strong difference between Gertwin and Morrison. So don't expect necessarily a Paul Parliament Liberal government to necessarily hurt here.
Just thought to tell you that the first figures are in for Clark.
What can you tell us about Christy Johnston, a very high-profile independent, Anthony?
She's the mayor of Glenorchy, which is the top half of the electorate, where Labor's vote is strongest. With only one sitting Labor member, with a relatively weak Labor ticket, she will do very well because she will take votes off Labor in the northern half of the electorate, where Scott Bacon polled well last time. He's no longer on the ticket. Just to let everyone know, it's a very complex contest because Cassie O'Connor usually tops the poll, is pretty much assured of a seat in Denison from the Greens. Ella Haddad is the only current Labor member. Sue Hickey was elected as a Liberal last time, upset a party by accepting the role of Speaker on Green and Labor votes. Was disendorsed for this election. She's running as an independent. She's former Mayor of Hobart. Elise Archer's quite popular, a Minister, Attorney General. She will be elected for the Liberals. Madeline Ogilvie.
The seat's entire women.
She was elected as a Labor member in 2010, 2014, defeated in 2018 by Ella Haddad. She was elected on a recount when Scott Bacon retired, but she became an independent, not as a Labor member. And for this election, she's been pre-selected as a Liberal candidate. So that's the complexity of the sitting members.
I do not know why you'd randomly switch parties like that, but weird things happen. There was a Labor guy that became a Nat in WA.
Those high-profile independents represent a fascinating subtext to tonight's vote, and we've got one of those high-profile independents.
Well, you better be taking your drinks if he said Denison.
Is in Moona, in Hobart's northern suburbs. Christy Johnston, how have you seen the vote? Those first few polling booths have come in. What's your reaction?
It certainly is very encouraging. We do know that in the north of the electorate, in the half of Glenorchy, we are still waiting legislative council votes to be counted first, but certainly I am pleased. I can see from the results that are coming in that people in Clark are feeling disillusioned with both the parties and looking to independence as an alternative.
And Christy, it's Emily Baker, so you've got your son Harry there with you, who's allowed to stay up late tonight. I really see how you go. You've said that you will vote with the community. Who are the people that you will be listening to if you were elected as an independent?
Look, obviously as an independent, it's really important to engage very closely with the community and to work with all stakeholders, including all members of Parliament, the business community, the community sector in particular, to understand what the real issues are, to make sure that I can represent fair issues with them. It's also really important that I assess each particular issue on its merits. So my campaign has been grassroots.
I'm not sure about some of you guys, but sometimes just listening to One Nation respond to interviews is just more interesting, because no offense to these people, I presume they are lovely people, but their responses can be very, very generic sometimes.
How do you plan on actually dealing with legislation, and where would you say you are on the scale of progressive to conservative?
Look, obviously I will take each issue on its merit and make sure that I again consult very widely with our community. Obviously some of my policies that I have had on my website around the poker machines, for instance, are progressive policies. The poker machine industry has certainly been buying elections for a number of years now, and we've seen the enormous harm that they do cause in our community. My community in Glenorchy in particular, $2 million a month goes down to the throat of poker machines, and that's simply not good enough, and I'm certainly very keen to represent those particular issues. The number one issue, of course, of this election has been health, and I have heard the most tragic stories in particular over the last 5 weeks where people have been left on waiting lists for far too long. They've been left in emergencies, but they're simply not getting the community or home-based healthcare. So I will be advocating very strongly for those people in particular if I'm lucky enough to be elected tonight.
And you're one of a number of independents on the Clark ticket in particular. You appeared on radio with Sue Hickey yesterday. Is there a secret meeting of independents every day to figure out how to get this parliament going, or what's going on there?
Well, there's been no secret meeting, but that's the beauty of independents. They can work with one another and they can work with the other parliamentary colleagues as well. I think the people of Tasmania are sick and tired of the petty politics between the two different sides of the Parliament chamber, and what they really want to see is respectful.
Thought on pokies.
And that's what independents can bring to the Parliament.
I don't gamble, so I really don't know much about Halden, but I have heard a lot of concerns about the machines. I know you'd probably expect me to know more because Nick Xenophon, a popular SA senator, ran on pokies, but I generally think yes, there should be restrictions on pokies, but I can't speak too much since I'm not obviously a gambler or a former gambler.
I will be providing stability. I'll make sure that there's supply and also confidence for Parliament, with the exception of any, of course, gross misconduct. But each issue must be dealt with on its merits. We can't possibly trade off some really important issues in our community, for instance, like health, as I say, or housing, or poker machine reform, or traffic congestion. So all of those issues deserve great attention and scrutiny, and both sides of politics deserve to be held to account.
And picking up on that, Christy, you are already the mayor in Glenorchy, and you've been doing, I'm sure, a lot of door knocking around Clark. If you are not elected tonight, what is the main message that you hope the major parties take from this campaign of various independents?
I certainly hope that both parties take away a message that they need to not take the community for granted, but they need to be out there listening to the community and dealing with the issues. People are sick and tired, as I say, with the petty party politics. They actually want their parliament and their parliamentarians to be focused on the issues that matter to them. They want solutions. They want problem solvers in Parliament. And both parties need to listen very clearly at this election that they need to get on and deal with the issues.
Thank you, Christy Johnston.
Right, do we have any more results yet?
This is Tasmania Votes live from the tally room in Hobart that's beginning to fill up. The crowds are behind us. It's 22 minutes past 7 and we've had just over 6% of the vote counted. I'm Guy Stainer.
And I'm Sabra Lane. Let's get an update on the count. Anthony.
Yes, well, looking at Franklin, which is the electorate we haven't looked at yet, these party totals are based on a collection of Bruny Island, southern Huon Valley and southern Kingborough, rural Kingborough, I think. And there's some very strong Green vote in the southern channel parts of Kingborough, and that's showing up in these early figures where the Greens are actually ahead of Labor on these numbers. The Liberals are on 40%, which is down from last time. Now, we're projecting Liberals will be more towards 43, the Greens will be down more towards 20 on the numbers we got at the moment, and Labor will be rising towards 30. But to be honest, these are not a very representative collection of polling places. It's more counting to come. But what is interesting to look at, actually I should look at the members for this seat, so we get onto this. Jackie Petrusma and Nick Street are the sitting members. Nick Street has come into the Parliament twice on recounts up Paul Harris in 2017 and replacing Will Hodgman in 2020. David O'Byrne and Alison Standen are the Labor members, and Rosalie Woodruff is the Greens member. Look at the leading candidates at this stage. Rosalie Woodruff is the leading at this stage. I said because that Green vote is very high. The Green vote tends to be concentrated on their lead candidate. Jackie Petrusma is now the lead candidate for the Liberals. Dean Winter, the one who's much controversy, the Kingborough Mayor, originally the Labor Party wouldn't pre-select him for the seat. The National Executive imposed him on the ticket. At this stage, he's ahead of the count. Now, this is from mainly southern parts of the electorate. There's nothing from Clarence yet, the other side of the river, where Dean Winter may not poll as strongly. But as you can see,
in general or Tasmanian? If the next election after this one actually is either going to be the federal one or my own state, depending on which one gets called first. If Morrison runs full term, then it's going to be my state, and if it's
party to be 51, so it's bouncing around 50. We're projecting Labor on 29.3. They've been bouncing around 30. The Greens currently on 12. Now.
So yeah, so it's either going to be my state election next or the federal election next.
So at this stage already we can say we can rule out that Labor can form majority government. I don't think anyone's expecting that anyway. But there's nothing in any number we've seen so far
As
that
I
suggests Labor
expected.
can get to 13 seats. They've got 10 now, lost one because of Madeleine Ogilvie resigning. So we can say confidently the Labor Party is not going to form majority government. We also cannot say the Liberal Party is going to form majority government. We can say that the Liberal Party will be the largest party in the new parliament. At this stage now, we have no idea whether that's majority or minority. But I think it's worthwhile at this stage ruling out that Labor can form a majority government. They won't be able to do it on the vote they're polling, although they may improve their position. We don't know whether the Liberals will be majority, and if they do fall short of majority, we haven't got enough figures from Clark yet to say what the composition of the crossbench will be. I think it's worth putting that on the stage at this point of the night.
All right, thank you, Anthony.
Pretty much what I was
Julie
saying.
Collins, do you agree with what Anthony's had to say to date? And if this bears out that the Labor Party's got 29% of the vote, that would be disappointing to you?
Well, Sabra, obviously we were, trying for majority government. That's what the whole campaign has been about. And certainly, the expectation, given what we did see in Western Australia and in Queensland, I think for the Labor Party to hold our own is going to be a good result, considering what we've seen in other states. But I'm hoping that it'll get up over 30%, and I'm hoping certainly that we see some great Labor candidates into the parliament.
Julie, can I ask, what percentage vote is expected, do you think, for Rebecca White's leadership to remain intact?
Well, I think if we hold our own, certainly Rebecca has led very strongly. She is and has been campaigning on health very, very strongly, and she's a very strong leader. And I think that the Labor Party team has been united in the last few weeks of the campaign. We've admitted we had a bit of a messy start, as did the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party, of course, still has one of their members or candidates under a cloud. We, of course, at least cleaned ours up and got on focusing on health, which seems to be the main issue that the voters were talking about.
And can I pick up on that? Sorry, Julie. You are on the administrative committee of the Labor Party. We just saw that Dean Winter is polling well. He's a former employee of yours, but you didn't vote for him to represent the party. Why was that?
Well, the administrative committee didn't. I'm not going to disclose how I voted, Emily, and obviously they're internal party matters, and I would never disclose that. But certainly we have a strong ticket, and Franklin is one of our strongest, I think. So I'm not surprised to see the results we're seeing tonight.
So do you back Dean Winter as a former employee of yours?
I back every candidate on the ticket.
And Dean Winter in particular?
We have a very strong ticket, yes.
Jonathan Dunham, this is an extraordinary election where we're potentially seeing the leaders of both major parties under extreme pressure tonight to hold their positions. We've already heard that Labor cannot win a majority. Rebecca White has spoken repeatedly about not governing in minority at all, but even more strongly worded has been the Premier, Peter Gutwein, who has said repeatedly that he will not form a minority government. Surely it's black and white. If the Liberals do not get 13 seats, his position becomes untenable.
Well, he's made very clear what would happen if we don't reach majority government, and that is something that is on public record. We are, though, just at 7% of the vote tonight, and we've just talked about Franklin, where we're getting votes from down the Huon and Channel areas, and that indicates just how patchy the information is at this stage. I remain very optimistic that we will be able to form majority government. I don't think the message of the last 5 weeks that the Premier has been providing ad nauseum is lost on voters, and I think that they will see, in order to continue the strength, the security, the stability we need to get out of the COVID pandemic and the flow-on impacts that we've all experienced, we need stable majority government, and that's what we'll be pushing for and hopefully achieve tonight.
Whether you get majority or not, it's certainly not looking like the landslide that was being projected at the start of the election campaign.
Yeah, I almost thought the Liberals had a landslide, but then later polls basically turned things around.
From now on, but Tasmanian voters would rightly be concerned about the fact that why have we gone to the polls early to end up with potentially the status quo, still with 13 members in the House of Assembly.
Well, 13 members of a particular party, in our case the Liberal Party. As it turns out, we lost a member ahead of the calling of the election. It's incredibly disappointing.
With respect, though, no one in Tasmania is buying that argument. That's right. But you had the numbers on the floor of the House. They were never tested. And you've taken the Tasmanian people to an early election, and we are looking at the status quo or even a worse result for the current government.
Well, I remain optimistic that we will have a majority government elected tonight, a majority Liberal government.
Which means the Tasmanian people have simply paid for 3 extra years of your government? Is that what it comes
Well,
down
in fact, we weren't in majority government. We had a member of parliament who said we guarantee supply and confidence, but as the Premier has repeatedly pointed out, when you pass a budget, to give effect to the programs that you're budgeting for, you need to pass other legislation. There's no guarantee that's
Regardless of the seat count, guys, do you think Labor's going to... I mean, do you think Liberals are going to actually lose votes, just in general? Just first preference votes, it's going to go down? Or do you think they're going to actually gain votes? Because if they lose votes, it's partly what he's talking about here. This election's been kind of pointless for the Liberals.
Turning back the clock to 2010, where we did have a minority government that sent us to the back of the pack, where we had the worst economic indicators, unemployment at 8.6%.
Nick started on 14 really, because you also had Madeleine Ogilvie. You had Sue Hickey promise supplies, so you actually are going backwards if you get 13, because you had 14 votes on the floor.
That's right.
Nick McKim, your take on the vote so far? We've had 10% counted. It does look like the Greens have had a bump, 2.4% swing, but again, it's early days.
Look, it is early days, Sabra. Just to respond to something Jonathan said, I mean, he's rewriting history as quickly and as desperately as he can. Minority governments in Tasmania delivered great results for this state, and that's consistently being shown, whether it's a Labor Green government or a Liberal Green government as we've had in the past. Now, the situation is, as Guy was saying, is Peter Gutwin has no choice. If he pulls up short of a majority, he will have to resign. Because the alternative is for him to turn to the Tasmanian people and say, I've been lying to you every day of this election campaign, and there is historical precedent
Crickets
here.
snaps.
When Ray Broom led a Liberal majority government in 1996, he said all of the same things.
I could see your point, Red Knight, but currently the votes are saying otherwise. It looks like they're possibly losing 1 or 2%, which might not be enough to lose them their majority, but would be somewhat embarrassing. I'm going to challenge you, Red Knight. You're saying 0.5 gain. I'm going to guess 1% loss.
Then he earned praise nationwide for his handling of the pandemic. Is this just a great misstep?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of commentary on the matter, the aim was to ensure that Tasmania had a stable majority government to make sure...
Sorry, Senator. You had a stable government. You had Sue Hickey in the fold. Peter Gutwin told her he didn't want her there, so she resigned, and then you've called an election.
What the Premier did tell Sue Hickey was based on a question that she asked, whether she would have the support for pre-selection. It was indicated that chances are not, given the things that had happened. It was her decision then to resign, which does in effect put the government into minority. So what we do need, in order to make decisions that actually do help us grow the economy, that help us protect our population when it comes to the health system, create jobs and all the opportunities we need to actually make sure we remain a prosperous state, is to have majority government. That's what this decision was all about, and that, I hope, is what we'll deliver tonight. And I totally refute the idea that there were 14 votes on the floor.
Well, I think it's over. What do you mean by that, cheese booger? We haven't actually quite got a definitive result yet. Libs are at 11, but they need 11. Just means they've got what? All two in each seat, and then 1 in 3. They need 13. They need 3 seats. They need 3 seats in 3 divisions. And I'm looking at Lyons, which I believe Lyons could see Greens get elected. Greens are polling at 11.7%. Anthony Green's would have got better results. It's possible if Greens win 1 in Lyons, and the Liberals are unable to gain 1 in Clark, they are in minority government.
One skerrick of doubt around majority is enough to create a very uncertain situation. Is which is what we don't need here. That's why we are having this election. Commentators will make what they have of it. At the end of the day, we are having an election, and I hope tonight we do get the majority government we so desperately need.
All right, now we're going to go to Leon Compton. He's on the tally room floor and he's with the MLC, Meg Webb.
I am indeed, Sabra. Thank you very much. Down on the tally room floor, as it starts to fill up with people around me, maybe a quarter of the 350 seats or so down here are starting to fill with punters as they come in. Meg Webb was elected to the Legislative Council in the seat of Nelson 2 years ago on a very strong position on the harm done by poker machines in the community, as well as a range of other issues. She joins me from the tally room floor this evening. Meg Webb, good evening to you.
Hi, Leon.
So we're listening to Anthony Green do the analysis. 10% of the vote counted. It seems possible, but not guaranteed, that the Liberals will find the 13 seats that they were seeking. How do you interpret that information?
Well, look, I think having seen this government in pure political self-interest take us to an election a year early and pull out all the stops to give themselves every advantage to win, if we see this government hold on to the position they have, or even maybe go back a little bit, I think we have to count that as a loss. We have to see that as the Tasmanian people saying, actually, we don't accept this sort of politically expedient action by a government of the day trying to advantage themselves, and they've actually given the government a bit of a slap if we see a backward step.
Let's talk about the Legislative Council. You sit, of course, amongst 14 others in the 15-seat upper house. 2 of those seats are up tonight, and what we've seen is something never before tried, which is a government going to an election on the same date as votes for 2 Legislative Council seats. Are you seeing evidence the Liberal Party have been advantaged by that, as some were speculating?
I think that's absolutely what we've seen. The party-aligned candidates have been thoroughly advantaged by having the 2 elections held on the same day. As you said, it's historically absolutely a first. We have never aligned those election cycles before, for good reason. We have our upper house election cycle arranged differently. We have different rules for those elections, and the whole purpose is to have a level playing field so that independents can compete against party-aligned candidates in a fair and free way, and the Tasmanian people can maintain the function and role of the upper house. What we're seeing today, if we see particularly the independent seat of Windermere go to a party-aligned candidate, that's a real backward step for the functioning of our parliament.
Do you also think it might raise a legal challenge to that result, given that in Tasmania you have about $17,000 as an upper house member to fund your entire campaign, from advertising to corflutes to anything else that you might do, but being rolled in with a state election campaign, it means you get that sort of uplift from your Liberal Party advertising. Do you think this may spawn a legal challenge?
Look, I think absolutely there are enormous questions to be asked about the legality of having these 2 elections held on the same day, and the implications that has for breaches of the Electoral Act when it comes to upper house expenditure by party-aligned candidates. We will, I think, see questions asked perhaps through the courts if the election goes by the way of a party-aligned candidate winning Windermere.
Meg Webb, a final question for you this evening. It's the question that the government wouldn't answer. I asked Peter Gutwin this 5 times. Sabra asked him only a couple of days ago on AM. What is the rate that you will charge the biggest owner of poker machines in Tasmania, the tax rate into the future if elected? That's legislation Parliament is yet to see and will come before you at some point in the future. How will you be handling that as a legislative councillor?
Well, we've absolutely got a process in place where that legislation must come through both houses of Parliament. And as an upper house member, I will be looking at that legislation incredibly carefully, as you can imagine, Leon. We have a duty to ensure that all legislation is robust and in the best interests of the Tasmanian people. So that's exactly what will be happening as it comes through the upper house. All of us, I would hope, will be examining that legislation. It's entirely unacceptable that the Premier has been disingenuous in not divulging what the casino pokies tax rate will be before this election. There is absolutely a deal in play here. There's no way the government doesn't know what that rate is. Either they don't know and therefore they actually haven't completed their policy, or they do know and they've kept it secret. Either way, unacceptable. We actually deserved to know that before we went to this election.
Thank you, Meg Webb.
Thanks, Leon.
Taking in most of Hobart and Glenorchy, the smallest electorate being contested tonight is Clark, covering less than
The lovely
0.8%
city of Hobart.
Tasmania. The seat was known as Denison until 2018 and is
And apparently Anthony Green keeps calling it.
The co-author of the Australian Constitution and the man who brought proportional representation to Tasmania. This is Tasmania Vote.
Well, there you go. The person who's asking about why Clark's named Clark.
And I'm Guy Stainer. Let's get the latest from Anthony.
Yes, we're going to do those figures for Clark because we've now got 6.5% counted. The Liberal Party's certain of one seat. They've got 1.76. We're projecting that 29% now it'll project towards 32. Our projection for the Greens is down slightly from 24 to 20. Labor, we're projecting to be about that figure. So there's a possibility that Labor will be under 20%. And the reason is Christy Johnson on 0.65 of a quota, 10%. She's competing with Labor in that northern end of the electorate in Glenorchy, where she's a very popular mayor. And Sue Hickey has got 9.8%, doing quite well at this stage. But the difficulty is both of those are about two-thirds of a quota. It's hard for, I don't see both of them getting elected because they are both competing with probably with a second Liberal. There'll be 3 seats, then there'll be a Liberal, Christy Johnson. And
Clark's going to be quite a mess.
If those numbers continue, and it's hard for them to get together. Though I should explain to people on the mainland that
I don't think it's a disaster for Labor. Like Labor's already having trouble in this election.
which allows them to have their own column. You must give 5.
It's really very much about can the Liberals hold on, because in every other election since COVID, the incumbent government's been re-elected with a larger margin, with the exception of the NT.
Has to give further preferences. So there'll be a lot of scrutineers out tonight looking at the.
So if the Liberals are unable to, win this election or are forced into a minority government, it will be a massive embarrassment. And so Labor's basically kind of almost the third wheel in this case.
To look at here is the change in the vote. The Labor vote has just collapsed. So a lot of that's to do with Glenorchy. A lot of that's gone to Christy Johnson. Sue Hickey is also doing well. So there's been a massive shift. The Liberal vote is down 5%. That they can still win 2 seats, even though their vote is down. And if they win 2 seats there, 2 in Franklin and 3 in the other states, that's 13. But I've just got to say there's a lot of counting to come in Clark, so we can't call that yet. But that's a hopeful sign for the Liberal Party, is their vote's not down much yet in Clark. But as I said, a lot more counting to come. And if you look at the leading candidates, Cassie O'Connor's got a quote in her own right, is certain of election. Elise Archer's well ahead of everybody else, and Ella Haddad is well ahead on the Labor ticket. And then you've got the 2 independents before you hit anybody else. Madeleine Ogilvie, the Labor turned independent turned Liberal MP, is third on the Liberal ticket behind Sormon. But again, we'll have to wait and see how those votes unfold. But we'll be coming back to Clark all night, because Clark is going to determine whether there's a minority government or a majority government. And if it's a minority government, it might be depending on one of these independents. So at this stage, looking at these numbers, you're either looking at the Liberals on 12 plus an independent plus Greens, or you're looking at the Liberal Party on 13 and an independent for Greens.
Julie Collins, we've been talking all night about high-profile independents in Clark. Based on those figures, it looks like the lion's share of those independent votes have come at the expense of Labor.
Well, it's only 6% of the vote counted, Guy, so I think I'll wait to see a few more figures before I make any judgments or comments about where that might end up. But certainly it's concerning to see that the Labor Party vote at this stage is down. But also noting that the Legislative Council booths are being counted first for the Legislative Council and the House of Assembly for those booths, and they're traditionally more Labor-leaning, those booths that they're leaving to count towards the end. So it'll be interesting to see what the final figures in Clark look like, and I think it might be one of those ones where we don't get a result tonight.
In both Clark and Franklin, you're currently behind the Greens on first preference vote.
Yeah, I think that'll change for sure in Franklin, because those booths where they have come in from are certainly very green booths. Normally quite green booths, so I would expect that the Labor ticket will pick up.
You're happy, Nick McKim?
Oh, well, happy so far. I think on these figures you could call both Franklin and Clark as a seat for the Greens.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Shane. This whole election was just Gerwin knew that if he let the election go all the way full term, like actually called the election when it was due, which is around the same time the federal election was due, he would not have his COVID popularity and would likely have been in a lot of trouble. But this election is showing that he might have already called it too late and is now sort of wasting everyone's time. I think all elections should be on fixed parliamentary terms. The fact that this and the federal aren't is, in my opinion, still kind of stupid. It's stupid that a premier can take advantage of his own popularity to call an election whenever.
this was the COVID election and people rewarding the Premier, looks like you've gone slightly back.
Well, so down 1%, and yes, as you point out, early days, and so let's think about the margin of error that might be there. I mean, just interestingly, a bit of feedback from some of our scrutineers in Franklin. I've been told that with the 4 booths, and this was about 20 minutes ago, though, so it may be slightly out of date, but the 4 booths that were in, Jackie Petrusma and Rosalie Woodruff were neck and neck with their votes, and Nick Street and Dean Winter were neck and neck too. Now, they would have all been those Western Shore booths, so Dr Woodruff's extremely popular down the Huon, and I think she was a local government member down there, and of course Dean Winter's the Mayor of Kingborough there. Nick Street's from down that way, although Jackie Petrusma is obviously our lead candidate, pretty popular as well. So look, we'll see some votes come in from the Eastern Shore, where you do have some of those more aspirational suburbs and people who may well be more concerned about some of the issues that have been highlighted in the campaign. So we'll see what happens as the vote count continues.
If the Liberals had chosen a more moderate leading Liberal for that particular seat, might it have been a different story tonight?
Look, I mean, it's Hare Clark, and we also
I agree, Shane. Totally agree.
The fact is, Jackie Petrusma is the most high profile of the remaining incumbents. She's been there longer and got a higher...
So, a bit of an update. Franklin is looking to be a 2 Labor, 2 Liberal, 1 Greens.
Often people will vote for the people
So I don't think Liberals are going to get their 3 seats there. It looks like they will get their 3 seats in Bass. Liberals look to get their 3 seats in Bass. Liberals look to get their 3 seats in Braddon. And so they've got their 2 seats in Bass and Braddon, which should give them 12, but they either need to win Lions, which it's going to be down to the wire with the Greens and Lions, and they need to win 2 in Clark, and it's possible that the Independents could win. The Independents are doing very well in Clark, so both Sue Hickey and Christine Johnson could potentially beat out Labor and the Liberals to win the 4th and 5th seat, which would leave it as a 1-1-1-1-1 seat, which would be quite interesting.
So I think that will see him in a very
fixed parliamentary terms, they're good except when the government is in a minority. I can see your point. The 2019 UK election, they have fixed terms there, but they were able to call it early because the minority government voted in favour of calling it early. Generally, you can... generally in a minority government, there's probably usually ways you can call an election early if need be.
Parachuted in to the Liberal Party on the same ticket and then stood prominently behind every politician at every press conference.
Well, look, I think as one of the Labor candidates answered before, Jennifer Houston from Bass, when asked about Jamie Finlay coming on board in Bass, look, this is the nature of Hare Clark politics. There are 5 spots at least to fill on any candidate, on any ticket, and one has to expect that there will be others than yourself there. They may be high profile, they may not be. They may bring a huge range of resources they can throw at a campaign. I know Simon has the eyes on his lane. He's run his race. He's worked extremely hard over this period of time. You've alluded to the prolific amount of promotional material circulating and on display in the community. I think that is testament to his hard work and what he's thrown at this campaign.
The Liberals' vote is going down in a lot of seats as more Labor-strong electorates are coming through.
Everywhere, vastly outnumbering red signs. Were you simply caught napping, or are you being outspent on the campaign?
Well, we're always outspent by the Liberal Party, and there's always more blue signs. That doesn't necessarily mean that they always win, but clearly, they're in the lead tonight, and clearly, when you've got more money like the Liberal Party has, that's what happens.
There has been a suggestion that you were caught napping with the early election. Were you prepared?
Well, obviously it was a year early. We'd rather that it was when it was supposed to be held, and the fact that it was called a year early on a false promise, I think the Tasmanian people are concerned about, and certainly I've been hearing that people are concerned about it. And interestingly, the pre-poll and the postals being up, I've been hearing from people that they were particularly concerned about going into polling booths and having to queue without having had their vaccine. for COVID because of the COVID election. People are concerned that it was called early when it didn't have to be.
Was it difficult to actually organise signage, or was this a strategic decision?
Well, I think it was, and some of
You
our
can see it yourself, guys. The vote's just down. Labor's obviously is down more, but the fact that Greens is up is going to make that chance that the Greens win a seat, and especially those independent votes also being up big time in Clark, there is generally a good chance that Liberals will hit minority government. They might have got to 11 seats, but they're still a long way off getting those last two. As I said, most of the seats they'll get the first 2 or 4 done, but it's those 4th and 5th seats that will take a long time to get counted through.
All of that was very, very difficult to muster in a very short period of time. There's been an extensive amount of work to fundraise, to deploy volunteers, to make sure material does hit letterboxes, so on and so forth. But look, we've done as much as we can in the short period of time we do have, but it hasn't been easy streets by any stretch to be organised like we would be in any ordinary campaign.
Now we've got Jeremy Rockcliffe, the Deputy Liberal Leader, up at the moment at Devonport Surf Lifesaving Club. But before we go to him, Anthony, can you give us an update?
We've got 26% counted in Braddon, the most advanced of the counts. The Liberals are easily over 3 quotas. The Labor Party's on 1.5 quotas. The ungrouped, and I'll come on to that in a moment, 0.5. The Greens vote's still very low, 0.366% of the vote. If we look at the change in votes since the last election, the Liberal vote's static, Labor vote down slightly, Green vote up slightly. The leading candidate, Jeremy Rockcliffe, has got 1.5 quotas. He's easily elected. Now, let's just look at the Liberal ticket on its own. Felix Ellis, who was elected on countback, is second and well on the way to being elected. Adam Brooks' vote is down about 6% on last time. So there's a big drop in his vote compared to last election. Roger Jensch is in 4th place and in danger of losing his seat. Now, the one warning I'd say about this, the candidates tend to come from different towns, Burnie versus Devonport versus Wynyard, versus Ulverston. So those candidates may swap around, but Felix Ellis was consistently 5th place last time. This time is consistently 2nd place, so that's good news for Felix Ellis. On the Labor ticket, Justine Kay is the new candidate, but Shane Broad and Anita Dow are still polling at top 1 and 2 on the ticket. The difficulty is that they've only got 1.5 quotas in their own right at this stage. Now I want to go back to the overall leaders. Let me see, this is the leaders display here. Let me get rid of that, leaders. I think I've broken it. Here we go, leaders. This gentleman, Craig Garland, the fisherman from Montague, he's currently polling ahead of the total for the Greens. If he stays there, then the Greens' preferences may flow to him, and he will feature later in the count. And that may happen, but it still requires Green voters to go beyond 5 preferences and to go to Garland rather than to Labor. So there's still the.
It will really depend on where the Greens voters go if Labor will win their 10 seats. Labor's definitely doing a lot worse than expected. Like, I was generally expecting them to win 2 in everything, but they're going to very much struggle in Braddon and Clark from what I've seen. However, again, a lot of interior votes, which are also likely. It's a lot of city votes still haven't come through yet.
Hair Clark system, you never quite know, but it looks promising so far. And this is my 6th election. They're all very different, and I'm very grateful for the support of our electorate.
Jeremy, it's Emily Baker here. We've heard that Peter Gutwin says he will resign if he's not elected in majority tonight. That isn't looking, or it's looking like that could be possible, that it could be a minority government. Are you possibly the next Premier of Tasmania?
Well, as Andy just said, Emily, good evening, by the way. It is early days yet, and of course, Hair Clark elections are always very close. You can get a large vote and just get there when it comes to the numbers at the end of the day.
Alright, we're closing in, guys, on the 3-hour mark, I believe. Well, I don't know, I'm losing track of time. We started at 5:30. No, sorry, 2-hour mark. We're closing. So basically, the 2-hour mark, guys. It's not. Do you think we're going to have? Do you think we're going to have a result soon, or do you think we may as well hang it up now and just let it carry on? I guess we could possibly go for another hour if you guys are up for it.
Look, I've I've been deputy leader of the party now for 15 years and seven years in government, and we've been blessed with terrific leaders in Will Hodgman, and of course Peter Gutland has been tremendous for Tasmania, keeping Tasmanians safe, and of course we always thank all Tasmanians for that. But of course I will always play a very constructive role, and you know, Peter Gutland, my expectation will be that we will win a majority government. That's my expectation. Peter Gutland will will continue to be the Premier of Tasmania, as he deserves to be.
Do you want the top job?
I'll never ask that question. It's a stupid question.
Of course, I had the opportunity of the top job just before Peter took over, of course, and I said at the time that he would be a fantastic Premier. My judgment was right, and Peter Gutland is still a fantastic Premier, of course, and my expectation is that he will, of course, will win a majority, but, you know, early days yet, as Anthony has said, but we're not going to deal in hypotheticals. We have been very clear that what Tasmania needs is a strong, stable majority government. Peter Gutland to lead the Liberal Party and indeed Tasmania, and Tasmanians have responded.
Jeremy, we're looking at what appear to be weak numbers for your colleague Roger Yench. He was a government frontbencher. He held the portfolios of housing, human services. We did see some pretty major issues in both of those, some of them that he seemed to be either unaware of or not dealing with. What do you make of his results so far?
Well, look, again, it's very early days, and I guess that's just a reflection of the very strong team that we have in Braddon, working together very strongly as a team for the last 5 weeks. Look, Roger's been a very capable minister, dealing with some very difficult issues, and he's handled it, in my view, well, with calmness, of course, and been very methodical in terms of his approach, and he's a caring person, and I'm sure that Roger will be still, of course, part of Parliament when all the numbers are counted. He's a terrific fellow, and I'm sure he'll still get there, but look, it's early days yet in the Hare Clark system. As I say, this is my 6th election. Anything can happen, Emily, and it's early days yet.
Jeremy, lovely to see that you've got the ABC on in the background there. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Emily.
This is Tasmania Votes, live from the tally room in Hobart, with a swelling crowd behind us, gathering as people expect to hear from the leaders in what are going to be fascinating speeches later this evening. We're approaching 8 o'clock. 23% of the vote has been counted.
I generally think this is quite an indecisive election, which is, I think, a loss for the Liberals because they were expecting a clean win.
23% heavily tilted towards Bass, Braddon and Lyons. So it counts much less than the rest of Franklin and Clark. Liberals have slipped back under 50% on our projection. Labor's still under 30% of projection. The Greens on 13, Shooters, Fishers, Farmers, Animal Justice and others on 4.8. Look at the change in vote here. And the Labor vote's down 3.9. Nearly all of that loss of support is in Clark, where their vote is down 20%. So all that drop is in Clark. The Green vote is up in both Clark and Franklin at this stage. So that's translating into an overall...
And Lyons.
If we look at the current state of the chamber, the seats we're definitely giving away. We've got the Liberals on 11, Labor on 4, Greens on 1. And we can add a few more seats leaning that way from memory. And we're getting the Liberals up to 12. Labor 5 and the Greens 1. Now the Liberals, we've got them in 3 in Bass, Braddon and Lyons, 2 in Franklin. We've got them 1 in Clark, so that gets them to 12. They need 1 more seat. If they get a second seat in Clark, that's where they have a potential still to get a majority. There doesn't seem to be a chance for them to reach 4 in one of the northern or central electorates, and they don't look likely to get 3 in Franklin. So this is all going to come down to the last seats in Clark at this stage. Now, Legislative Council, which we don't often talk about. Craig Farrell, we've got 22% in Derwent. He's ahead on 47% against Ben Shaw from the Liberal Party.
Only 3 people.
Behind earlier is the larger booths from New Norfolk and the like have come in. Then he's pulled ahead. So at the moment, it looks like he's on track for re-election. We don't have any booth comparison in that electorate. I haven't heard anyone suggest he was likely to lose. The other electorate is Windermere, which covers the areas north of Launceston up to Georgetown. This is where Ivan Dean, the independent, is retiring. With just under 30% counted. Nick Dygan is on 37%. Jeff Lyons of Labor, 25%. Will Smith, 24%. They don't have how-to-vote cards in, just to explain to people on the mainland. You normally look at this and say, what does a how-to-vote card say? There's no how-to-vote cards at elections in Tasmania. The candidates are also randomised on these single-member elections as well. So the preference flows are not very strong. I would say on these numbers, Nick Dygans has helped because he's on 37%. The question is, because this has been held on the same day as the House of Assembly for the first time, if Will Smith comes close to victory after preferences, then there will be a challenge in court. I'd almost think he's almost certain. The other thing to say to people is that we don't get preference counts in upper house counts here. They do not guess who's the final two candidates and do a throw. So we'll just get first preferences tonight, and they may or may not do a preference distribution tomorrow, but that's just to keep people up with the counts in Windermere.
Yeah, the upper house in Tasmania is a bit weird. Basically, it's a thing where you elect two candidates every year, and then by the time you get around to, like, I think 6 years, you get back to your original two candidates. And there's like a 12-member chamber. It's weird. You don't usually think about it because they don't normally happen in an election day. It's weird that they're doing it at this time.
Counted just over, so I hope to see an improvement in Labor's vote as we go on tonight.
Yeah, and Nick McKim, sorry, we talked earlier too about Braddon and that Craig Garland vote. What's your expectation on the way that his preferences will flow?
Well, it's a question of really on those numbers of whether we get cut first or Craig Garland gets cut first, and Anthony's been very clear that at the moment we're looking at numbers from booths that Craig would be expected to do quite well in, and some of the bigger booths in some of the urban areas of Braddon, perhaps he won't do so well, and you'd expect our vote to be higher there. Look, Craig's a bit of an environmentalist, but not totally. He still supports logging the Tarkine. He's been very strong on fish farms, as have the Greens. And by the way, I think that's been a real sleeper issue this election, the fish farms. Richard Flanagan launched his book Toxic only a week or a week and a half ago, and it's in its fourth reprint already, and a lot of Tasmanians are asking why we're giving these big aquaculture corporations free rein to destroy our marine environment. So I think that's been something that has swung some votes to us. In Braddon, look, it's a wait and see for us. Our vote looks too low probably to win a seat in Braddon, but we would expect a reasonable preference flow from Craig Garland if he gets cut before we do.
We're going to cross to Leon Compton now, who's on the tally room floor. What have you got for us, Leon?
Well, thank you very much, Guy. I am indeed down on the tally room floor, and it is lovely to have your company as the room starts to fill behind me. As we mentioned earlier, last of the tally rooms in the entire country, and this tally room is starting to fill now. Of the 350 seats here, maybe a quarter of them are filling, but more and more people coming in from downstairs and up into the Grand Chancellor Hotel just behind you. I want to say good evening to Paul, who's brought his young son Flynn down with us this evening. Paul, good evening to you.
Thank you, Leon.
Why have you decided to come here tonight, Paul?
Well, I've been down to the tally room quite a few times, and I think this could be the last time.
Yes, so I went to their Parliament House when I was in Hobart back in 2019, and I was definitely quite amazed at just the uniqueness of their Parliament system. Sure, their lower house vote systems are basically identical to the ACT, minus the fact that their electorates are mapped to the federal ones. But the whole upper house is definitely one of the weirdest electoral systems you'll ever hear of.
Have a bit of a look around the tally room this evening. You can start to see behind me, Guy, lots of people are coming in here, but still a few empty chairs. There's an expectation, because typically this is an event where people mill, that maybe some people have been put off by the need to sort of register on the way in the door and observe social distancing, as we're doing here this evening. But Liz has come down to the tally room and has been sitting here patiently. In fact, Liz is watching the ABC's coverage on the app on her phone. Hello, Liz.
Difficult to hear, yes.
Liz, tell me why you've come down here tonight.
Well, because it's accessible, I think, one reason. Because it's Tasmania, it's easy to do this sort of thing. And I've never done it before. And I thought rather than watching on television, I'd watch it in real life.
And Liz, from our conversations earlier, you were hoping perhaps that Peter Gutwein would be rewarded for his handling of COVID-19?
Well, I think COVID-19's not over yet, and I think that Peter Gutwein and Sarah Courtney have done very well looking after us in Tasmania. And when the borders open, who knows what will happen. You know, we can't really relax for quite some time. I've had my first AstraZeneca, but yeah, you know, there's a way to go. But we're lucky in Australia.
By the way, while we wait for some more numbers to come through, would you guys be interested if I open up another form of communication for my channel? Like, I've been querying whether or not you guys would like me to move on to Twitter so I can make announcements like these electoral live streams more public or something like that. Like, because unfortunately I couldn't announce the selection video because they've got rid of my ability to post discussions on YouTube, and so I've been curious whether or not you guys have been interested in whether or not I like, you know, have a Twitter account you guys can follow where I can make announcements like that, or just talk about other stuff. Just be a bit more interactive, because YouTube obviously isn't a very interactive platform. I can't make a lot of discussion stuff, especially because my sub count is too low to do things like, you know, channel comments and stuff. So if you guys are interested in, like, you know, if you want a Twitter or a Facebook group or something, feel free to let me know, and I'll see if I can get onto making just another way for you guys to, you know, see my content outside of just the YouTube videos and such.
The federal member for Lions, but first let's get an update from Anthony on how Lions is looking.
Well, we've got 32% of the vote count now. The Liberal voters are steadied up just over 50%, three quarters. Expected to hold that three seats. The Labor vote's risen slightly to 1.78. The Greens are on 0.64. The other parties have dropped away as the count has proceeded. But look at the leading candidates. Rebecca White is elected. Guy Barnett is elected. Both over a quota. Mark Shelton will be elected. And given John Tucker's well ahead of other candidates, we expect that John Tucker will win the third Liberal seat. Now, just let me, I'll break down the Labor ticket on its own. Janet Lambert finished second last time, but was passed by Jen Butler on preferences after Rebecca White went up. Whether that'll happen again, we'll have to wait and see. But just to go back to the party totals, the change in vote, not much change again. A slight rise in the Green vote, slight fall in the Labor vote, slight rise in the Liberal vote. But overall, a definite three Liberals. I would say probably two Labor. I expected on the posters and pre-polls Labor vote would increase slightly. So in the end, not much change in Lions.
Alright, so it looks like Lions is not going to be a Greens pickup like we thought it was.
Does that surprise you that Labor seems to be struggling to get that second quota in your seat there?
No, look, this happened last election as well, so this is pretty much a rerun of 2018 where the Liberals got three and we got
Just probably should turn the volume up on the video.
at the end. So it'll be interesting to see who gets the second spot for Labor. It came down to Jen Butler and Janet Lambert last time, and it looks like history repeated.
Brian, it's Emily Baker here, and this is an issue that's relevant to the state election and also to you. We're seeing areas like Sorrel grow quite significantly. I guess you could say the gentrification of Sorrel. You've picked up part of Launceston into Lions during a boundary redistribution. Does Labor have more work to do to pick up those votes in particular, where it could be a bit of a softer target for you guys?
Always a lot of work to do in Lions, a very big seat, 30,000 square kilometres, but there's been massive growth in the south of the seat, so Sorrel, Brighton, Derwent Valley, a lot of new suburbs popping up, so there's a lot of work to do in those new suburbs, new people, new families. You know, they all need services, they need access to health, and you're quite right, we did pick up the suburb of Prospect Vale, which is in Meander Valley Council, but they do culturally think of themselves as part of Launceston, so they're in my seat now. And we've been doing a fair bit of work up there as well. But, you know, Emily, it's a huge seat. 12 councils, 12 mayors that I deal with, and we've got a lot of challenges in the seat.
Let's pick up on a couple of the issues, because Labor's position has changed on them, and they're top of mind for some voters in the Lions electorate. One is the Westbury prison, so a second prison for Tasmania being built in the north of the state. Originally, Labor was totally opposed to a Westbury prison and then seemed to change its position. Now it's saying we'll build a northern prison, but we don't know where. We've also had the Lake Malvina proposal, which is a proposal to have helicopters fly in through the Wilderness World Heritage Area. Again, it's not quite clear exactly what Labor's policy is on that. Do you think that that's hurt you? And you've had candidates speaking out against the party's position.
No, with the Westbury prison, for example, we've been very consistent. We support a northern prison. It's needed for families to have access to their inmates who are in the prison. But we think the process in selecting Westbury has been entirely wrong. People were taken for granted, they weren't consulted properly, and we can't have faith that this is the right site because the process has been so flawed. And of course now we've got federal implications with it being a site of environmental significance, and the federal Environment Minister, Susan Ley, has not come clean really on how much role she has in whether that prison goes ahead or not. It will be very interesting if the Liberals do form government after tonight, what the future of that site will be, or whether they will try to move it again. We just don't know. And
Rebecca White left the door open to moving, I guess, Ashley Detention Centre from where it is in Deloraine. Again, a big employment getter in your electorate of Lyons. Would Labor support a northern prison, say, in Ashley?
Sorry, I missed that, Emily.
Sorry, Brian, I asked whether Labor would support a northern prison on the site of Ashley, for example.
I'm having trouble with the earpiece. Somewhere Ashley and moving Ashley. I'm sorry, I can't hear you clearly.
It looks like we've got a technical problem there in the seat of Lyons. We've got more than 30%
Oh no, Lyons died.
Let's check in on the latest results with Anthony.
Look at the party totals. The Liberal Party's on 3.6. We think that will fall slightly with counting to come. And I should point out, because of the Windermere by-election, the Legislative Council election, there's a lot of votes in the northern part of Launceston that haven't come in yet. Mowbray, those sorts of areas which are very strong for the Labor Party. So the Labor Party's on 1.46, the Greens on 0.64. So while you'd say on those numbers, Liberals and the Greens will be competing for the last seat, I think those numbers will change around a bit. What is interesting to look at the change in vote that's occurring. Liberal vote up, Labor vote down, others down, and I'm just not convinced that the missing northern Launceston figures don't change that. But on the leaders, Peter Gutwin is just under three quarters in his own right. Now, again, this has got everything from the northeast of the electorate where he's from. He's from Bridport, I think, yes, Bridport. And he's done really well in that part of the electorate. Michelle O'Byrne is second, Janie Fidland 0.56. Jennifer Houston is way down the list, and we think, unless there's something remarkable in the figures to come, we think she'll be defeated. It's very difficult for her to come from fourth place on that ticket when your two leading candidates are both under a quota. So I can't see how Jennifer Houston gets re-elected. Jack Davenport on 0.34. Michael Ferguson, this is Michelle O'Byrne, Michael Ferguson and Sarah Courtney will be elected on Peter Gutwin's surplus, as normally happens in Bass. That's pretty much close to a record vote for a member of Parliament. Leaders often get huge votes. I think Will Hodgman's got 2.5 quotas. So that's 2.5 quotas. That's up there with Robin Gray and Doug Lowe from the past. And so that's the position there. And if we look at, I'll just look at the party totals again, just to clarify that. 3.6. The Liberals have got 3, Labor's got 1, and there's a battle between the three parties for that last seat. And at this stage, I wouldn't pick one of them to be the winner.
A swing of nearly 28% to the Premier Peter Gutwin. And Nick McKim, at the start of the night, you were quite bullish about Jack Davenport's chances. It looks like he's probably going to fall short there.
Oh, I wouldn't necessarily say that, Guy. What I think is that what might help Labor potentially sneak over the line for that 5th seat is that their votes are pretty evenly split between Michelle O'Byrne and Janie Finlay, whereas if there was more of a discrepancy there, as I said earlier, that would have opened the door for us, but certainly not giving that seat away on those numbers.
You think there might be a leak out of the Labor ticket?
Well, if what Anthony's just said, whether there's a leak out of the Labor, there's always some leakage out of tickets. Our voters are generally pretty disciplined and will vote 1 to 5 Green. And then many of them will stop after that because they just can't simply stomach voting for either the Labor or Liberal parties, and good on them.
No.
Who knows numbers if
You can't,
if
like, this is
some of
why,
the key
sorry,
finishing moves
I'm going to be a bit
that
honest. It's one of the reasons why I really don't like the Greens, is because they take left-wing ideals, like, you know, take left-wing voters and then get them to just vote for the Greens, waste their vote, and not get a Labour Party elected. It's like, I don't care if you got 1 or 2 votes. If a Labour Party loses, you don't get any progressive policy.
But that is the Hare Clark system, and you know, you can work incredibly hard, and you can make.
I support your desire to vote Greens, but just don't screw up other left-wing parties to do it.
But I would say, as Anthony hinted, there are a lot of Labor booths yet to come in Bass.
And Anthony, you've got an update for us on Franklin.
Yes, we've you have to sort of pour through these figures sometimes to work them out. In Franklin, the Liberals are not going to win 3 seats. Their vote has fallen. Without Will Hodgman, they haven't got somebody to pull the vote in the ticket. Labor is just under 2 quotas, and the Greens...
So Franklin looks to be the same.
Rosalie Woodruff will be returned there. We're predicting she'll be 20% or more by the end of the night. If you look at the change in vote screen, the Liberal vote is down.
Yes, call me based. Greens voters, if you're a Greens voter and you don't second preference Labour, then you're hurting your own cause. I'm sorry.
And Nick Street is possible. I haven't got the rest of them marked, so let's go and have a look at this graphic. It said Jackie Petrusian elected, Rosalie Woodruff has got just under a quota in her own right. And this is interesting, Dean Winter is running second in that electorate. They're ahead of David O'Byrne. Alison Standen can't get elected from there. I think we might mark her as defeated because unless something happens by the time we get to the 50% of the vote, she can't close the gap. There'll be 2 Labor candidates trying to reach a quota, and you can't turn 0.24 into 0.6 and pass someone. Nick Street will be the second elected as a sitting member. And Beck Enders from Huon Valley is doing quite well. Whether that will drop off a bit for her when the Clarence vote comes in, which is on the other side of the Derwent. So we'll see what happens there, but that's definitely looks pretty clear to be 2 Labor, 2 Liberal, and one Green, which means it's 3-3-3 in the north, 2 in Franklin, 1 more in Clark. Liberals 12. The next time we look at Clark, we'll get a better handle on what the numbers are looking like.
Anthony, thank you very much for that. Those 2 seats, really, it's the tale of the leaders or their impact on them. 3 quotas for Peter Gutwin in Bass, that's quite phenomenal. And without the Will Hodgman factor in Franklin, your reaction to that?
Well, look, it was something I think we had to expect. 2.5 quotas swashing around in the electorate of Franklin without the person who got them there to regain them makes it very difficult for us to catch all of those votes. That's absolutely.
I haven't had any response yet about you guys whether or not you want to end the stream or not. Like, I'm getting a little tired. Unfortunately, as much as like you, I want to see where this goes, but
I'm hopeful though, as we do.
I don't know how if we'll actually get a clear result tonight. This is what sucks is with single seat electorates, it's mostly just who's ahead. They're ahead. They win the seat. They win the election. Whereas here, it's just constantly a prediction game, and you just don't know who's going to win.
So I think was the other, Bass rather, the other electorate we were looking at.
3 quotas.
That's right, 3 quotas there, but it's just like we had in Franklin with Will Hodgman, the leader there getting the lion's share of the vote and it trickling down to the other candidates on the ticket.
Yeah. Julie Collins, Dean Winter leading the Labor ticket in Franklin. The Labor Party didn't even want him as a candidate.
Well, obviously he was on the ticket, and Rebecca White did make sure that
he
Dean was on the ticket.
He was knocked back as a candidate. What does that say about the Labor Party that you didn't want a candidate who ultimately is leading your ticket in Franklin?
Labor is polling quite strongly in Franklin. As I said, some of those booths that we would expect to be Labor still haven't come in yet. So it will be interesting to see when we get big booths in from the Eastern Shore about what that looks like. And I hope that Labor gains, and I'm really pleased that it looks like at least 2 for us in Franklin.
We need to come back to talk also about Dean Winter and Alison Standen. But for the moment, we've got Felix Ellis standing by, I believe, in Braddon. Anthony, let's have a look at the results first before we cross to Felix Ellis.
Well, let's have a look at those overall party totals. The Liberals are above 3. Labor is on 1.5. We've still got Craig Garland doing quite well and ahead of the Greens. So, I mean, it's definite 3 Liberal, 1 Labor, and then it's in doubt who's got the other seat. I'm saying Jeremy Rockcliffe is elected. Then it's between Felix Ellis, Roger Yench, and Adam Brooks as to who's next elected on that ticket. And Anita Dow and Shane Broad. If if Labor gets 2 seats, they're in the race for those final seats. So we've only got Jeremy Rockcliffe elected. The reason I would have declared Felix Ellis elected, he's second on the ticket at the moment. My doubt about that is just simply his vote was quite regional last time. As you get the bigger booths from the towns further east, his vote may drop. So, but there's definitely 3 Liberals. And on that last count, the Liberal vote has actually increased since the last time I looked. So a very poor result for both Labor and the Greens in Braddon.
Anthony, can we have a look at the actual quotas for those candidates?
For each candidate? Yeah. Leaders. Jeremy Rockcliffe's got 1.6. Felix Ellis 0.57. He's got 9.5. Adam Brooks 0.5. He's on 8.4. Roger Jensen down here is on 0.42. And there's some other Liberal candidates down the bottom here. Unless Roger Jensen does really well in, I think he's from Devonport. He's from Central Coast anyway. Unless he does really well, he can't catch either Felix Ellis or Adam Brooks. There will be 3 Liberals. It's likely to be Felix Ellis and Adam Brooks. So again, that would be a changeover of sitting member. Justine Key, who's added to the ticket quite late, has not outpolled either of the sitting members. So she hasn't been able to do what Michael Ferguson or Michelle O'Byrne did, which is transfer.
Yeah, Red Knight. I don't think we will know the results tonight.
We cross now to.
But Lachlan, the ACT election, we at least knew that Labor and the Greens had achieved a majority between the two of them. As I say, I'll keep it on for about another 10 minutes, and then I'm going to stop the stream. But if you want to know my current prediction, I'm predicting Liberals are going to win their 3 seats in Braddon, Bass and Lyons. I expect Labor to win the other 2 in both those cases. In Franklin, I expect it to stay the same. 2 Liberals, 1 Green, 2 Labor. And in Clark's going to be the weird one. I expect there to be 1 Greens, 1 Liberal, 1 Labor, and the 2 Independents. That's my current guess, is going to be those 2 Independents. And that is going to give the Liberals 12 seats and miss their 13, and they'll be forced to be in a minority government. Ironically, I think they'll be forced to have a minority government with Sue Hickey, the person that literally caused this election in the first place, which will probably be a bit of irony for them. But that is my current prediction. As a Labor supporter, I was expecting Labor to do better in Clark. I was hoping that they might be able to form a minority government with the Greens, but their voting base has been massively eaten out by Greens and other independents, which has unfortunately hurt them quite a bit, and they have seemingly gone a bit backwards, which unfortunately is sad as a Labor supporter to look at, but it's not unexpected in this situation. But arguably, I think Labor was already going to have trouble. The person I think is more unexpected is the Liberals themselves, who were expecting this election to be a run-up with their popular, with their solid COVID response. They thought they could just win this election easy, but it looks like it's going to be very tight. I don't think they're going to get their 14 seats. So sorry, Red Knight, if you're expecting to gain a seat. I don't think that they're not gaining a seat. I am pretty much sure they are not gaining a seat this election.
Liberal government, and I'm really optimistic that my colleagues will be able to help us deliver 3 seats in Braddon at least, and if we continue the hard work that we've done over the last 3 years, that we'll be able to get a strong, stable majority government, whatever that order looks like.
And if you don't get a strong, stable majority government, Felix Ellis, what do you think happens next?
Look, that's for people probably more experienced than me, but like as I say, the Tasmanian people will have their say on what that result is. It's early days. Obviously, there's still plenty of counting to come. I'm optimistic, but at the end of the day, that will be up to the voters to decide.
And back to your colleagues in Braddon, you're a family man yourself. You've just welcomed a newborn baby, and congratulations again for that. I want to talk about Adam Brooks. What do you make of what's been revealed over the past 48 hours?
Yeah, look, Emily, I'm not a commentator, but obviously I'm focused on running my own race and making sure that we get a stable majority Liberal government. you know, as you say, it's been an interesting campaign for me. I campaigned out of the maternity hospital for the better part of a week, and haven't got a lot of sleep over the last couple of weeks, I have to admit, but you know, we're just really proud to be able to make a contribution to this community as a family.
Felix, you do look tired, so I hope you can get some rest tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
From the northern edge of Greater Hobart all the way to the southern fringes of Launceston, this is Lyons, the largest electorate in Tasmania. Jointly named after the only Tasmanian to ever serve as Prime Minister, Joseph Lyons, and his wife Enid, the first woman elected to the Federal House of Representatives. This is Tasmania Votes. We're at the Tally Room at the Hotel Grand Chancellor in Hobart. I'm Sabra Lane.
And I'm Guy Stainer. Well, Felix Ellis might not be a commentator, but one man who is Anthony Green with the latest on Clark.
Well, Clark is determining the fate of this election. The Liberal Party is currently on 29%, 1.75 quotas. Look at the whole numbers here. The Greens have got 1.57, Labor 1.15. So there's 3 seats decided on the quotas there. There is then 0.75 for the Liberals, 0.57 for the Greens, 0.6 for Christy Johnson, 0.58 for Sue Hickey. Our projection is the Liberal vote will increase 2 or 3% from this point. I believe the Green vote will dip from this point, based on where the polling places are from. Now, the fact that Hickey and Johnston are in the contest makes our predictive figures a little bit more ropey, but there's no shift in the Labor Party vote. They stay roughly where they are. So I think a lot of this change here is coming down to having come from the Labor Party, and I think those effects are cancelling themselves out. And there seems to be a bit of a swap between the Liberals and Greens depending on where the polling places are from. So we're correcting from that. That's a complex explanation, I'm sorry. The change in vote, Liberals are down 5%, but that still puts them, and I think that puts them towards 2 quotas. This is a corrected swing. Labor's down 22, the Independents up 20, and the members, they're the sitting members, sorry, the leaders. Cassie O'Connor's easily elected. She'll probably be the only one with a quota. Elise Archer will be elected when the preferences fold up through the ticket, as will Ella Haddad, which is then going to leave, just to go back to the party totals, as I said, we got 0.7, 0.8 of a quota there with a Liberal. As I said, I think that number will come down, and then you'll have 0.6, 0.58. The Green preferences and the Labor Party preferences are both likely to help the Independents, but I'm still not convinced that you can get 2 Independents ahead of a second Liberal. So with 3 seats decided, the most likely result on the numbers we're seeing at the moment is the Liberals will reach that second seat and one of the Independents will be elected. Now, if that scenario comes off, the Liberals have got majority government, but we've only got 30% counted. We'd want to see more counting, but my projection is the Liberal vote will increase from here. If that flows through for the rest of the counting tonight, we may have a firmer handle on who's won this election and whether it's majority government.
Nick McKim, we've seen...
Unfortunately, we won't be able to see that because I am quite tired. So I will be wishing you guys a good night. I hope you guys had some fun. Otherwise, this wasn't quite as crazy as the WA election. We also didn't have Mike Rand giving us his excellent take on the election. But I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's stream, and I'll see you hopefully for the next election. Until then, bye.